So I want to start off with a question for you listening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever wondered why a simple phrase like raspberry ice makes your mouth water, but then you hear something like frozen dessert, and it just leaves you entirely cold?
Right. It just sounds completely unappealing.
Exactly. I mean, think about it for a second. If you're sitting there right now, maybe you're looking at a menu on your phone, one of those options paints this vivid, sharp, sensory picture in your brain.
You can almost taste the tartness.
You really can. But the other one, frozen dessert, it just sounds like a vague scientific classification.
It sounds like something you'd find labeled in a cryogenic supply closet, you know?
Yes!
Frozen dessert. It's just completely devoid of life or texture or even temperature, which is ironic.
Which is so funny when you think about it. And, this phenomenon is not just about food. It goes so much deeper than that.
Oh, absolutely.
It's really about how the specific, granular words we choose dictate the very reality we construct for the people listening to us or reading our work.
Yeah, the words literally build the world.
They do. So today, for this deep dive, we are deconstructing the hidden architecture of persuasive writing. And we have incredibly rich, frankly indispensable source to guide us through all this today.
We really do.
We are exploring the revised and expanded edition of Words That Sell by Richard Bann.
And, calling it indispensable is almost putting it mildly.
Really? You think so?
Oh, definitely. Bayan isn't some academic theorist writing from a detached observation deck. He's a lifelong practitioner.
Right. He was actually in the trenches.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
he spent 14 years as the advertising copy chief at Daytimers.
Wow, 14 years.
Yeah, which means he had to convince people to buy organizational tools day in and day out. That is not an easy gig.
No, I can't imagine it is.
And he also had these serious stints at Time Life Books and Barron's educational series. He's been in the absolute trenches of direct marketing.
So he really knows what actually works, not just what sounds good in a seminar.
Exactly. And he describes his own book as he calls it a personal magic kit or a bottomless tackle box filled with glittering lures.
I love that. A bottomless tackle box.
Mhm.
That's a brilliant framing for it.
It really is. I mean, it operates practically as a dictionary of persuasion. It contains over 6,000 entries designed specifically to help you promote products, services, or ideas.
6,000.
Yeah.
That's wild. So for you listening, our mission for this deep dive is to essentially deconstruct exactly how these specific lures work.
Right. We're opening up the tackle box.
Exactly. Because whether you are currently staring at a blinking cursor, trying to craft an email to your boss to get a project approved.
Which is something we've all done.
Oh, a million times.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're building a landing page for your brand new startup. Or honestly, even if you are just trying to convince a skeptical friend to go see a specific movie with you this weekend.
It all applies.
It really does. We're going to unpack the exact words, the underlying mindset, and the psychological strategies that convert a passive reader into an active participant.
Because converting someone from passive observation to active participation it's really the holy grail of all communication.
It is the whole point.
But before we dive into the specific vocabulary, like the actual words that Selbayan insists we have to take a massive step back.
Okay, so where do we start?
Well, we have to look at what's happening cognitively and strategically before a single word is ever typed out.
Ah, right, the prep work.
Yeah. In our source material, he includes this foundation he calls a crash course in copywriting.
So let's pull that apart,
Mm.
because I think there's this pervasive myth out there that writing is just, typing.
Right. Just sitting at a keyboard and waiting.
Yeah, you wait for the muse of inspiration to tap you on the shoulder, and you just start outputting text.
Which is almost never how it actually works.
Never. And Bain shatters that illusion immediately. He argues that the most persuasive writing doesn't start with language at all.
No, it starts with deep experiential research.
The pregame.
Exactly. And he is adamant about this. His very first rule is that you must gain first-hand knowledge.
Okay, what does he mean by first-hand knowledge, practically speaking?
It means you can't just conceptualize the product or service from afar. He says you must touch it, taste it, or use it.
Touch it or use it.
Yeah, like if it's a physical product, you literally have to hold it in your hands. You have to live with it for a while and get the physical feel of it.
You have to become the consumer.
Exactly. You have to look at it from the exact vantage point of the prospective consumer.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic here for a second, because my inner corporate cynic is screaming right now.
Go for it. Let's hear it.
Let's say I am writing an email campaign to sell a new, highly complex software tool.
Hmm.
Or, okay, even something mundane like a commercial lawnmower.
Okay, a lawnmower.
Right. I am an executive,
Yeah.
or I'm a marketer sitting in an office. I have the entire spec sheet right in front of me.
Right, you've got all the data.
I know it has a 21-inch steel deck. I know the exact torque of the engine. Do I really genuinely need to go out into the hot sun, get sweaty, and push this widget around the grass?
I mean, you can certainly just read the spec sheet, but your resulting copy is going to sound exactly like a spec sheet.
Cold and mechanical?
Yes, cold, mechanical, and totally unpersuasive. What Bayan is subtly introducing here is the idea that persuasion fundamentally requires empathy.
And empathy requires shared experience.
Exactly. If you only read the dimensions of that lawnmower, you're just going to write, it features a 21-inch steel deck.
Which is boring.
It's incredibly boring, but if you actually go out in the sun and use it, you might realize, wow, this thing turns on a dime around my oak tree.
Oh, I see.
And, it doesn't get bogged down when the grass is wet.
That's a huge difference.
It is, because that granular experiential detail, the wet grass, the tight turn, that is what actually connects with the human being on the other side of the transaction.
That makes total sense. It actually tracks completely with how method acting works, if you think about it.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison. How so?
Well, if you think about an actor on a stage,
Right.
and they're holding a prop coffee cup that is supposed to be full of boiling hot liquid.
But it's actually empty.
Right, it's totally empty. The audience can almost always tell.
Because they swing it around too easily.
Exactly. The actor doesn't feel the physical weight of the ceramic. They don't handle it with that slight subconscious caution you naturally use when you know something might burn you.
That is so true.
If they haven't felt the weight of the prop, their delivery always feels just slightly hollow and robotic.
Wow, yeah.
So the same principle has to apply to writing. If you haven't felt the weight of the product, your words just lack gravity.
That is a perfect analogy, because those micro hesitations of an actor, they're perfectly analogous to the micro hesitations in bad writing.
Right.
When you lack that firsthand knowledge, you end up relying on cliches. You have to guess how the product feels, and the reader can smell the guessing.
They absolutely can.
So once you do have that physical or experiential knowledge, Bayan introduces the next critical pregame concept, which is positioning.
Positioning. Okay, break that down for us.
It means you have to figure out how your idea or your product is intrinsically different from or superior to the competition.
So finding your unique angle.
Yes. And the gauntlet he throws down here is tough. He says you have to define this positioning in a single phrase.
Just one phrase.
One single phrase. If you can't boil its unique value down to one isolated phrase, your entire marketing strategy is completely unfocused before you even type a single word.
So it's not just about knowing what the thing is in a vacuum.
Right.
It's knowing the exact coordinates of where it sits in the universe of all the other competing things.
It's all about relativity, yes.
Yeah.
And finding those exact coordinates requires knowing your audience intimately.
Okay, so audience analysis is the next step.
Right. Bayan stresses that you must always gear your copy to the specific needs, anxieties, and tastes of your customer.
You really have to interrogate the demographic.
You do. You have to ask, are you talking to mass market consumers who are just looking for a quick fix?
Or are you talking to, like, upscale young professionals who are obsessed with status?
Exactly. Or maybe you're dealing with hard-boiled professional procurement buyers, people who possess this ruthless bottom-line mentality.
They don't care about status, they care about margins.
Right. So the specific language that triggers a teenager who's buying a pair of limited edition sneakers
Would be totally different.
you would actively alienate a corporate purchasing manager who is evaluating logistics software.
Which naturally dictates the strategy of your layout, and honestly, your word count, too.
Yeah, that's a huge factor.
Boyan notes that the length of the copy usually varies in direct proportion to the company's investment in the product or the consumer's financial risk.
Right. The higher the risk, the more copy you need.
Exactly. Like, if I'm standing at a checkout counter buying a $2 pack of gum, I do not want or need a 5-page brochure explaining the complex, multi-layered flavor profile of the peppermint.
Right. You'd be like, just give me the gum.
Exactly. The virtues are self-evident. The risk is basically zero. But if I'm agonizing over a $50,000 car purchase,
Or a massive enterprise software migration for your entire company.
right, I am terrified of making a mistake. In that scenario, I want all the details. I need the explaining to soothe my anxiety.
Yes. The copy acts as an anxiety reduction tool.
Mhm.
And taking that a step further, this entire pregame, the research, the positioning, the audience analysis, it's ultimately an exercise in ego removal.
Ego removal.
Yeah. You are actively, systematically removing your own preferences from the equation.
You have to step outside yourself.
Right. You are immersing yourself in the reality of the product, and you're immersing yourself in the psychology of the audience. You're hunting for that precise intersection where those two things meet.
I guess that intersection is where the actual writing finally begins.
It is.
But this brings us to what might be the most fascinating and, frankly, kind of tragic part of the whole process.
Tragic is a good word for it, honestly.
Because once the foundation is laid, this is where incredibly smart, highly educated people make their absolute biggest mistake.
Oh, yeah.
They start talking about themselves.
It is the most ubiquitous trap in all of business communication. From cover letters to, like, multi-million-dollar Super Bowl commercials.
We see it everywhere.
Everywhere. And Bayan lays down what we could consider the ultimate golden rule of copywriting right here. He says you must relentlessly stress the benefits over the features.
The benefits over features.
You have to make this painful, conscious transition from company-centered copy to customer-centered copy.
So moving away from the corporate ego.
Yes. He writes that you must resist the overwhelming temptation to thump your chest on behalf of your company.
It's the difference between saying, look at how great we are, versus look at what we can do for you.
That's the exact distinction, because a feature is an objective fact about the product or the organization.
Like saying, our company's been in business for 50 years.
Exactly. Or, our new software platform utilizes 256-bit encryption. Those are company-centered facts.
They just stroke the ego of the CEO.
Right. The customer doesn't inherently care. But a benefit is the translation of what that fact actually accomplishes for the end user.
So how does that translate?
Instead of the encryption stat, the benefit is you can sleep soundly knowing your sensitive data is safe from hackers.
Ah.
Or instead of 50 years in business, it's you get the ultimate peace of mind that only comes from a half-century of proven reliability.
You know, I always visualize company-centered copy as being trapped on a spectacularly bad first date.
Oh, that's perfect. A bad first date.
Yeah. Imagine you're sitting across a candlelit table, and the other person just spends 45 straight minutes bragging.
Oh, the worst.
Right. They list their Ivy League resume, they talk about the horsepower of their car, they mention how much their watch costs.
They're just endlessly listing features.
Exactly. See how great I am. And as the person sitting across from them, you're just exhausted. You're looking for the fire exit.
You're checking your watch, hoping a friend calls with a fake emergency.
Exactly. But then contrast that with a phenomenal first date. The other person asks about you. They listen intensely. They make you feel fascinating and valued.
Right. They're focused on your experience of the evening.
They talk about exciting things you could experience together. So if you're writing an email or a pitch right now, you have to remember that the listener is your date.
That is such a good way to frame it.
They do not care about your corporate resume. They only care about how interacting with you is going to make them happier, wealthier, more comfortable, or more secure.
The bad first date analogy is absolutely flawless because it highlights the sheer narcissism of feature-driven writing.
It really is narcissistic.
It is. You have to write with the reader's distinct interests paramount. But in doing so, Bayan warns against overcorrecting into another major pitfall.
Okay, what's the pitfall?
We could call it the paradox of fabulous.
The paradox of fabulous. Tell me more about this, because I feel like I see this all the time, especially in social media.
Oh, it's rampant on social media. So Bayan writes, don't fill your copy with empty overstatements. Too many words like fabulous and fantastic within a brief space will completely destroy your credibility.
Okay, so what's the paradox part?
The paradox is that if you desperately want the reader to think your product is fabulous, your very first instinct is to just run around shouting the word fabulous.
Well, you want to tell them how great it is.
But the moment you do that, you stop sounding like a trusted advisor and you instantly start sounding like a propagandist.
It totally conjures the image of a used car salesman.
Yes.
You know, the guy in a loud plaid suit screaming on a late-night local TV commercial. These deals are incredible. This inventory is fantastic. We are practically giving them away.
Exactly. And the sheer volume of those adjectives instantly triggers our defense mechanisms.
We become deeply suspicious. We're like, what's wrong with the cars?
Exactly. Which forces us to answer a really difficult question. If you are literally forbidden from saying your product is fabulous, how do you actually convey its fabulousness?
Right, how do you communicate the hype without the hype words?
Bayan provides a brilliant structural insight right here. He says, You do not tell the audience the product is fantastic. Instead, your writing must be so hyper-specific, so empirically accurate, and so vivid that the audience reads the facts and says to themselves, wow, that is really fantastic.
Oh, wow. That is a massive paradigm shift for a writer.
It completely flips the script.
You do not supply the emotional reaction. You merely supply the precise ingredients that inevitably force the reaction to occur in the reader's own brain.
Yes, you let them do the math.
Like, you don't write, this winter jacket is incredibly warm
Yeah.
and fabulous.
Right.
You write, this jacket is insulated with a patented thermal mesh that actively traps your core body heat. So even if you are standing completely still in a blizzard at 10 below zero, you will feel like you are sitting by a roaring fireplace.
And then the reader processes that image, the blizzard, the fireplace, and they think, man, that sounds fantastic.
You guide them down a path to a conclusion they feel they reached entirely on their own.
Exactly. You never force-feed them the conclusion. But to execute that effectively, to manufacture that fantastic reaction in the reader's mind without using the word, you have to understand the fundamental neurological battle taking place in their brain.
The battle between intellect and emotion.
Exactly. It's the eternal conflict.
Because we all love to flatter ourselves into thinking we are purely rational, logical creatures.
Oh, we love to think that.
Especially when we are at work, right? Sitting in a boardroom or making a high-stakes financial purchase, we crunch the numbers. We build pivot tables.
We make spreadsheets.
We think we are making decisions based entirely on the data.
We desperately want to believe that. But Bayon's rule number 9 just obliterates that notion.
Rule number 9, what is it?
Appeal to the emotions rather than the intellect.
Even in business.
Yes, even in business. He points out that even when you are writing for an audience of highly educated, skeptical college professors or, top-tier Fortune 500 executives, you cannot forget their biology.
They're still human.
They are still part of the human tribe. And the human tribe is fundamentally motivated by gut feelings, driven by the amygdala.
Let me stop you right there, though.
Yeah.
Because I can practically hear a B2B sales director listening at this right now, and their inner skeptic is screaming.
Oh, I'm sure it is. What are they saying?
They're thinking, look, I sell heavy, multi-million-dollar industrial robotics to procurement officers. I cannot be emotional.
Right.
If I appeal to emotions, don't I risk sounding manipulative or cheesy or completely out of touch with my industry? Don't highly educated technical audiences demand a purely cerebral approach?
It's a completely valid fear, and Bayon addresses it head-on in the book.
How does he counter it?
He conceives that a purely cerebral approach, like just listing the technical facts, the torque, the tensile strength, it might make your reader nod in quiet admiration at your flawless logic.
Okay, admiration is good.
It is good, but admiration does not sign checks.
Oof, that's a great line.
An emotional approach gets action. Emotion is the combustible fuel that blasts the message off the ground.
But what about the cheesy factor?
Right. To the sales director's point about sounding cheesy, emotion absolutely does not mean melodrama.
Right. You're not writing a sob story.
Exactly. It doesn't mean writing a tear-jerking soap opera about a forklift. This is where Bayon's Rule 6 becomes the linchpin of the whole strategy.
Rule 6.
Be specific. Emotion is generated through concrete, observable details, not vague sentimentality.
Which brings us in a perfect circle back to the opening question we asked you, the listener, right at the start of the deep dive. The raspberry ice versus the frozen dessert.
That is the perfect illustration of this concept.
Right.
Because frozen dessert is a hazy intellectual abstraction. It speaks to the prefrontal cortex. It technically, legally describes the object in the bowl.
But it evokes absolutely nothing.
Right. But raspberry ice speaks directly to the senses. It bypasses the logic center completely and triggers a visceral memory of a sweltering summer day, the sharp tartness on the back of your tongue, the vibrant, bleeding red color.
That is emotional specificity.
Exactly. Hazy abstractions kill persuasion because the human brain has nothing textured to latch onto.
So applying that back to the sales director who's selling the industrial machinery,
Mm-hmm.
they don't write a cheesy emotional plea begging for a sale.
Definitely not.
But they also don't just say, our robotics offer a 30% increase in operational efficiency.
Because that is a frozen dessert.
Yes. Instead, they use emotional specificity. They write something like, this robotic arm cuts your assembly downtime by 40%, meaning you will never again get one of those panicked, 2 a.m. phone calls from the factory floor telling you the line has stopped.
Wow, yes, that is a highly specific, deeply emotional benefit.
The elimination of 2 a.m. anxiety.
Exactly, but it's wrapped entirely in a professional business context. You are selling peace of mind, not metal.
You are selling the absence of dread.
That's a great way to put it. And while we are analyzing the mechanics of specificity, we really have to examine what Bayan identifies as a remarkably common, almost invisible copywriting pitfall.
Which one is that?
He calls it the then what trap.
Oh, the then what trap. I have to admit, ever since I read this section of the source material, I see this trap absolutely everywhere. It is infuriating once you know to look for it.
It is a plague in modern advertising.
It really is.
A company will confidently write that their new battery lasts longer or their software gets the job done faster.
And Bainpoint points out that the immediate subconscious question that just echoes in the reader's mind is, then what?
Exactly, then what?
It's a dangling comparison.
Yep.
Our battery lasts longer. Okay, then what? Then a burning candle.
On a potato.
Right. Then your previous terrible model. Then the leading competitor's premium model. If you do not answer the then what, the reader's brain literally snags on the omission.
It creates massive cognitive friction.
It does?
It creates this huge gap in credibility.
Yeah.
Because you are essentially demanding that the reader do the heavy lifting of filling in the blank.
And the confused or overworked reader never buys.
Never. You have to sharpen the resolution of the picture. If you say, lasts 50% longer than the standard industry alkaline battery, you have removed the friction. The comparison is closed.
Okay, so if you are listening right now, let's assemble the pieces we have so far.
Let's do a quick recap.
We have done the experiential pre-game research. We touched the product.
Right.
We have shifted our ego out of the way,
Yeah.
moving from company-centered features to customer-centered benefits. We aren't bragging on the first date.
Exactly.
We are relying on emotional specificity instead of hazy abstractions. Raspberry ice, not frozen dessert. And we are actively closing our comparisons to avoid the then what trap.
That's the foundation.
But how does that actually translate to the physical page? Like, how do we structure this psychology into a flowing pitch?
Well, Bayan maps this out beautifully. He structures the core of his book around the natural psychological progression of getting a human being to say yes.
Okay, what's the progression?
It moves in 4 distinct sequential phases. You have grabbers, descriptions and benefits, snappy transitions, and clinchers.
Let's linger on these phases, because the source material provides these incredible, highly specific lists of words for each stage. It really proves why he called it a tackle box.
It's extremely practical.
So the first phase is the grabber. These are your subject lines, your headlines, the provocative opening questions.
Right.
Their solitary, desperate job is to halt the reader's momentum and pull them into the message. What stood out to you in Bayan's collection of grabbers?
What's truly fascinating is how deeply rooted in behavioral psychology these grabbers are. For instance, under the heading heads and slogans, Bayan lists phrases like, "The truth about your blank could shock you."
Oh, that is so potent, because it completely weaponizes the curiosity gap.
Yes, it does.
It implies that there's a hidden danger you're currently totally unaware of. You cannot not want to know what the shocking truth about your credit score or your diet or your home security is.
It creates a literal itch in your brain that can only be scratched by reading the next sentence.
You have to keep reading.
Another brilliant one he lists is simply, "Let me ask you a simple question."
That feels very disarming.
It is incredibly disarming
Oh.
because it halts the reader's internal distracted monologue and forces them into this pseudo-dialogue with the writer.
You feel obligated to listen to the question.
Exactly. He also highlights the immense psychological power of the trial offer to remove perceived risk at the very genesis of the interaction.
Like what kind of phrases?
Phrases like, "Send no money now," or "We'll buy it back, no questions asked."
Ah, right. Risk reversal.
You are grabbing their attention by essentially telling their amygdala that they're completely safe. They have absolutely nothing to lose by reading further.
That makes a lot of sense. So once you have successfully grabbed them by the collar with the subject line or the headline, you transition into the second phase, which is descriptions and benefits.
The meat of the pitch.
Yes, this is the absolute meat of the pitch. And this section of the text is exhaustive. I want to look closely at a few of my favorite phrases from the book here, because they illustrate how words carry distinct physical textures.
I'd love to hear them.
For example, when you want to describe a physical product as durable or solid, you don't just use the frozen dessert word and say, "It's strong."
Right, strong is boring.
Bayan offers phrases like practically bulletproof, shrugs off, scoffed at, impervious to.
Oh, I want you to really listen to the verbs in that list. Shrugs off and scoffs at.
They're great, right?
They're amazing because you are actively personifying an inanimate object. You are giving a piece of luggage or a phone case a defiant attitude.
A defiant attitude, yeah.
A suitcase that scoffs at aggressive airport baggage handlers paints an entire movie scene in your head.
It really does. You can see the baggage handler throwing it and the suitcase just laughing it off.
It is vastly more appealing and memorable than a suitcase that is merely described as impact resistant.
Because impact resistant is just a spec sheet. Scoffs at is a character trait. I absolutely love that distinction.
It brings it to life.
It does. And under his category of money-making, he provides phrases like dynamic growth potential, your way to wealth, and turn your free time into profits.
That last one is a masterclass in connecting two totally disparate concepts.
Turn your free time into profits.
Yes, because it addresses a very specific universal pain point. We all have these small pockets of free time we feel we are wasting.
Go on our phone.
Exactly. And we all secretly wish we had more financial security. That phrase bridges those two desires seamlessly.
And if you analyze the self-improvement category, the vocabulary is entirely built around empowerment and like arming the reader for battle.
Arming them. Right.
He uses phrases like unleash your creativity, arms you with vital insights, your blueprint for achievement. Notice the specific use of the word arms.
Yes.
It implicitly suggests that the corporate world is this hostile battleground, and this product or this book or this course is your weapon. It is your competitive edge.
That's so subtle but so powerful. These aren't just adjectives describing a product. They are psychological triggers meant to make the reader feel powerful.
Right. So you have grabbed their attention. You have painted this vivid, textured picture of the benefits they are going to receive. The third phase is where I think 90% of amateur writers trip up and just lose their audience entirely.
Snappy transitions.
Yeah, snappy transitions.
This is the connective tissue of the copy. And yeah, it is where copy often stalls, stutters, and ultimately just dies.
Why does it die there?
Because if you just stack benefit upon benefit, fact on top of fact, the reader eventually experiences cognitive fatigue.
It gets overwhelming.
The rhythm becomes monotonous. It's just too much density. So Bain provides an entire toolkit of transitional phrases whose sole purpose is to keep the momentum going, to grease the wheels, essentially.
He suggests phrases like, what I'm leading up to is this.
See, that specific phrase is brilliant because it is slightly self-aware.
Self-aware, how so?
It acknowledges to the reader that you have been building a case, and it promises an immediate satisfying payoff in the very next sentence. It physically pulls the reader's eyes forward down the page.
Do you want to know what they're leading up to?
Yes, exactly.
Or how about this one? As if that's not enough.
Oh, that phrase creates a profound sense of overwhelming value.
It feels like an infomercial, but in a good way.
Right. You have just handed them a massive benefit, and before their brain can even fully process how great it is, you are piling on another one.
But wait, there's more.
Exactly. Phrases like, and there's more, or, but let's take a closer look. These phrases act as cognitive lubricants. They ensure the reader slides effortlessly from one paragraph to the next, without ever finding a convenient, logical place to stop reading and go check their phone.
I pictured exactly like a massive water slide.
A water slide, yeah.
Right. Once you have pushed them off the edge with the grabber, the transitions ensure they don't get stuck on a dry patch of friction halfway down the tube. You just keep the water flowing so they keep sliding faster and faster.
That's exactly how it works.
Which inevitably brings us to the pool at the bottom of the slide. The fourth phase. Clinchers. Closing the deal.
The clinchers. These are the final, persuasive closing statements that push an undecided, wavering reader over the response threshold.
It's the moment of action.
It is. Beyond gives us phrases like, start reaping the benefits today, which really focuses on immediate gratification.
We all want it today.
Exactly. Or, repeating the ultimate risk reversal we saw in the grabbers. What have you got to lose?
Or my favorite one, don't go on wondering if you could have.
Oh, that one is deeply insidious in the best way possible.
It really is. It plays so heavily on the human fear of future regret. FOMO, basically.
FOMO on a massive scale. When I look at these lists laid out in the book, I realize they function exactly like a cheat sheet for the human operating system.
That's exactly what it is. If you know what primal feeling you want to evoke in your listener, whether it's security, greed, ambition, or comfort, You literally just open the book and pull the corresponding trigger words.
You do not have to reinvent the wheel of human psychology every time you sit down to write a marketing email.
Which is such a relief.
That is the immense practical value of the text. It frees up your cognitive load. Instead of staring at the ceiling, groping around in the dark for the right adjective, you can focus entirely on the broader strategy of your campaign.
But there's a massive caveat we have to address here.
A huge caveat.
Because language is not fossilized in amber. It breathes, and it evolves over time.
Yeah.
A trigger word that worked flawlessly in 1984 might sound completely ridiculous or archaic today.
It definitely would.
Which brings us to a fascinating evolution in the text itself. The evolution of selling and the danger of puffspeak.
This is perhaps the most culturally revealing section of our deep dive today.
I agree.
In the introduction to this revised edition, Bayan actively discusses the linguistic evolution that occurred between his first edition, which was published in 1984, and the second edition from 2006.
Okay, so a 22-year gap.
Right. And he notes that while the primal preoccupations of our species, our obsession with status, our need for security, our fear of missing out, our desire for convenience, those remain entirely constant.
Humans haven't changed.
Biology hasn't changed. But the language we use to tap into those ancient drives has shifted significantly.
So walk us through that. What exactly changed in the zeitgeist between the corporate 80s and the mid-2000s?
The shift is subtle, but vital for anyone writing today. He notes there's a demand for much more informality, especially in direct communication like emails, letters, and brochures.
Informality.
Yeah. You see a heavy reliance on contractions saying don't instead of do not.
Right.
You see shorter sentences, fewer dependent clauses, and vastly less complicated syntax. He writes that there is, and I quote, not as much earnest paternal lecturing and a little more attitude.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
There is much less of that 1950s, I am the towering corporate authority, sit down and listen to my decree vibe.
Exactly. Nobody wants to be lectured to anymore.
And it's replaced by more of a conversational, peer-to-peer, almost irreverent vibe. You start seeing phrases like slam dunk or kicks butt entering the professional lexicon.
Yeah, that 90s and 2000s attitude era really bled into copywriting.
It did. But my absolute favorite observation he makes about this evolution is what he calls the death of the exclamation point.
Oh, the exclamation point. Bayan astutely points out that in modern communication, most of us desperately want to appear cool, calm, and collected.
Right, we want to seem effortless.
And it is simply not cool to exclaim.
He says, and I think this is the most visceral image in the whole book, he says, all those exclamation points look like little droplets of sweat on the forehead.
It's so gross, but so accurate.
Think about that for a second. If you are reading an email from a vendor and every single paragraph ends with 3 exclamation points,
You literally picture someone desperately sweating, begging you to pay attention to them.
it reeks of profound insecurity.
It does. It ties directly back to the paradox of fabulous we discussed earlier. If your writing is strong enough, if your benefits are genuinely compelling, you do not need a typographical crutch like an exclamation point to signal that it is exciting.
The facts themselves should generate the excitement.
Exactly. And this modern drive for clear, authentic, unsweaty language brings us to the back of Bayan's book.
The appendix.
The appendix. The hit list of inflated, ridiculous words. He officially dubs it puffspeak.
Oh, puffspeak. If you have ever worked in an office, you know it intimately.
You've lived it.
We all suffer through it in endless corporate all-hands meetings, in dense press releases, and in mission statements that mean absolutely nothing.
It is the mortal enemy of good copy.
It really is. Let's actually look at the list and translate some of these because I think it's such a fun exercise.
Let's do it. I'll give you the inflated puffspeak word, and you provide Bayan's translation into plain, piercing English.
I'm ready.
Okay, first one. Instead of writing in your memo that you need to conceptualize a new strategy.
Just say think. It is so much cleaner. We need to think about a new strategy.
Much better. Okay, next. Instead of telling your team you want to effectuate a new policy.
Effectuate. Say, bring about. Or simply caught. Think about how absurd that word is. Nobody at a weekend dinner party pours a glass of wine and says, I really need to effectuate a change in my diet.
Right. Your friends would laugh you out of the room.
It is completely unnatural. It's a purely corporate artifice.
It really is. Here's another classic. Instead of warning that a market shift might impact negatively.
Say worsen. 1 2-syllable word instead of 2 clunky words, and it carries so much more emotional punch. This will worsen our sales.
You feel the danger of worsen much more than impact negatively.
Absolutely.
Okay, how about instead of hiding behind the classic HR term downsizing?
Just say layoffs. Don't insult the reader's intelligence by hiding behind a sanitized, synergistic jargon word. We all know what downsizing means.
It just breeds mistrust when you use it.
It really does.
And here is my personal favorite on his entire list because it reveals so much about human nature.
Which one?
The corporate obsession with the phrase bottom line, as in, what is the bottom line here? What is Bayon's translation for that?
Oh, this is the best one. What's in it for us?
So good.
That is so incredibly brutally honest. When a client leans back in their chair, crosses their arms, and asks, okay, what's the bottom line? They do not care about your revenue projections.
Not at all.
What they're actually asking is, what is in it for me? How does this benefit my life?
Bayon calls these puff-speak words elaborate disguises for mundane or unpalatable concepts.
Elaborate disguises.
Yeah, they are verbal armor. People use them to sound smarter than they are or to soften the blow of bad news. But all they really do is create a massive, icy distance between the writer and the reader.
Because every time you use a jargon word, you burn the reader's mental glucose, forcing them to decode it.
Exactly. You're giving them homework in the middle of your pitch.
But, I can hear that same stubborn B2B executive pushing back again right now.
The guy with the robotics?
Yeah, the robotics guy.
Yeah.
He's saying, but wait, don't my corporate clients expect this kind of high-level jargon?
Ah, right. The expectation of formality.
Yeah, if I'm pitching a C-suite, don't I need to use words like synergy, paradigm shift, and core competency just to prove I belong in the room and be taken seriously?
It's a really pervasive fear, especially in corporate culture, but Bayon's entire philosophy obliterates it.
Remind us how.
Go back to his foundational premise. Even C-suite executives are biological members of the human tribe.
The amygdala again.
Exactly. A CEO processes the word think infinitely faster and with far more emotional resonance than the word conceptualize.
Right.
The brain does not have to expend energy translating think, it just understands it. Puffspeak forces the brain to decode the language before it can even begin to evaluate the merit of the actual idea.
And you don't want them evaluating your vocabulary, you want them evaluating your offer.
Exactly. If your idea is genuinely good, you do not need to dress it up in a rented tuxedo of jargon.
A rented tuxedo, I love that.
The jargon is almost always a desperate disguise for weak, mundane ideas.
It really is the frozen dessert problem all over again, just wearing a tailored business suit.
That's exactly what it is.
Synergistic operational optimization is a frozen dessert.
Yes, it is.
Saving your team 3 hours a day is raspberry ice.
That is the perfect synthesis.
So, as we start to pull back from the specific vocabulary lists, the grabbers, the clinchers, and all the puff speak, let's look at the horizon.
Let's zoom out.
What is the ultimate overarching takeaway from this bottomless tackle box? If someone has been listening to us for the past hour, what is the soul of this methodology?
Bayon writes something very profound, almost philosophical, in his introduction to the second edition.
What does he say?
He says that the surprising, enduring popularity of this book over the decades has proven to him that you do not always need to hire a Madison Avenue ad agency to create highly effective messaging.
You don't need Don Draper.
You don't. You do not even need to be a professional, formally trained writer. Really, what you actually need are 3 distinct things: the genuine desire to sell from the heart, the psychological savvy to truly reach your audience where they are, and the ruthless discipline to use precise, benefit-driven language instead of empty corporate jargon.
I view that as the democratization of persuasion.
It completely is.
It is a powerful message.
Huh?
It is saying that anyone, a student, a middle manager, a startup founder, can do this if they just respect the architecture.
If you follow the rules of the game.
Right. Do the experiential pregame research, go touch the lawnmower, actively remove your own ego, and focus on the customer's benefits. Rely on emotional specificity over hazy abstractions.
Guide the reader smoothly down the waterslide using strong grabbers and snappy transitions.
And ruthlessly, violently eliminate the puff speak from your vocabulary.
It is ultimately a discipline of clarity and empathy. That is what makes it a true magic kit.
Clarity and empathy, I think that's the perfect way to summarize it. So, for you listening right now, I want to leave you with a challenge, a final provocative thought to take with you into your day.
Ooh, I like a good challenge.
The next time you are scrolling through your phone, or maybe sitting on a subway looking at a billboard, and an ad or a post actually makes you stop and pause.
Which happens to all of us.
Do not just look at what the company is selling. Look at the exact specific words they use to hijack your attention.
Reverse engineer it. Deconstruct the magic trick.
Exactly. Ask yourself, did they use a shockingly emotional grabber? Did they use a snappy transition that forced your eyes down to the next line without you even realizing it?
Was there a killer clincher at the end that made you instinctively reach for your wallet?
Did they use a verb that gave the product a specific attitude? Once you start seeing this hidden architecture, the underlying matrix of these words that sell, you will never read a marketing email, a billboard, or even a restaurant menu the same way again.
You'll see right through it.
You will start to see the gears turning behind the language. And more importantly, you will realize that you never have to settle for serving your audience a frozen dessert when you now possess the precise recipe to create raspberry ice.
That is an incredibly empowering place to leave it.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. We will see you next time.
Think about the last time you bought something online that you absolutely did not need, like unequivocally did not need.
Well, we've all got a box of those things somewhere in the house.
Right, and you probably justified it to yourself later.
Yeah.
You told yourself, it was a logical choice or an investment or a smart preemptive purchase.
Of course, that's the comforting illusion of autonomy.
Yeah. But what if the decision wasn't made by your logic at all? Like, what if you were compelled to pull out your credit card, not because of the product's actual utility, but because, I don't know, a copywriter intentionally left out an exclamation point?
Or they used a highly specific verb that triggered a microdose of dopamine in your brain.
Exactly. And that's what we're getting into today. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are tearing down the drywall to look at that exact invisible architecture.
It's an uncomfortable reality to face, honestly.
It really is. We are unpacking the mechanics of persuasion through the lens of Richard Bayan's classic reference book, Words That Sell. And this isn't just a dictionary.
No, not at all.
The author frames it as a personal magic kit, or maybe more accurately, like a bottomless tackle box of time-tested lures used by professional copywriters. So our mission today is to dissect the bait.
The tackle box analogy is perfect, I think, because a copywriter's tools are exclusively words.
Right.
And we're going to look at the specific, infallible adjectives and these ageless phrases that physically pull an audience into a message.
That's like looking at the code behind the conversion.
Exactly. And the promise for you listening is twofold. First, by the end of this deep dive, you're going to possess this sort of matrix-level vision of how you are constantly being marketed to.
Which is eye-opening on its own.
Right. But more importantly, you'll learn how to wield these exact same linguistic tools yourself.
Because, whether you're writing a landing page for a startup or pitching a new software in a Tuesday morning boardroom or just, trying to craft an email to a furious client without making it worse.
You are a copywriter.
Yeah.
By definition.
Yes. And failing to recognize that is one of the biggest blind spots in modern professional communication.
We tend to quarantine the concept of advertising language, right? We think it's this specialized dialect used only by Mad Men executives or spam emailers.
Yeah, but anytime you're trying to persuade or motivate an audience, you're employing these mechanics, even if that audience is just one hiring manager scanning your resume.
And what's profoundly revealing in Bayan's work is that while the delivery mechanisms have mutated wildly over the past few decades, the fundamental human psyche.
The lock that these word keys fit into.
Exactly. That lock has remained entirely static.
And the history of the text itself illustrates that perfectly. So the first edition of Words That Sell dropped back in 1984.
A completely different world.
Completely. And Bayan talks about the massive tectonic shifts in advertising language since then. He notes this progression from the folksy, almost paternal jingles of the mid-20th century, the please don't squeeze the Charmin era.
Right. Very earnest.
Yeah, and then it shifts into the upscale, verbose, retro posturing of the late 90s. Think of the J. Peterman catalog.
Oh, where a simple white button-down shirt came with a 3-paragraph story about a romantic encounter in a Moroccan cafe.
Yes, exactly that. And from there, we transition into the highly compressed, edgy, digital age we occupy now.
Well, the cultural tide dictates the stylistic overlay, When Bayan updated the book for the digital era, he really had to codify those shifts.
How so?
So, modern copy has shed its formal armor. It relies heavily on contractions, for instance. A professional sales letter today uses your and will.
Whereas a 1985 letter would have rigidly insisted on you are and we will.
Right. The syntax is completely flattened out. There are fewer dependent clauses, fewer convoluted structures that require you to hold multiple concepts in your working memory.
The tone shifted from a lecture delivered from on high to an intimate, slightly irreverent conversation.
Yeah. And there's this specific observation Bain makes about punctuation that I just found incredibly revealing.
Oh, the exclamation points.
Yes. He points out that modern effective copy uses vastly fewer exclamation points.
I love how he describes them. He says, all those exclamation points look like little droplets of sweat on the forehead.
It's such a visceral image. The implication is that it's simply not cool to exclaim anymore.
Which makes sense. Consider the psychological dynamic of punctuation. An exclamation point is a typographical demand.
Right, it's the writer insisting on an emotional reaction from you, rather than earning it.
Exactly, rather than earning it through the descriptive power of the nouns and verbs. When you read a piece of copy littered with exclamation points, it triggers a subtle sense of distrust.
Your brain perceives the desperation. You can almost feel the writer hyperventilating on the other side of the screen.
It's the linguistic equivalent of that guy at a networking event who laughs too hard at his own jokes and stands a little too close to you.
Spot on. The person who actually commands the room doesn't have to shout. Their presence and the substance of their stories draw you in.
Right. The moment you introduce an exclamation point, you break the spell of quiet confidence. You're practically begging the reader to feel excited.
Which is the fastest way to ensure they feel nothing at all.
Yeah, absolutely nothing. The goal of persuasion is for the reader to be the one exclaiming internally.
The text itself must remain the cool, collected anchor. But, we have to reconcile this evolution towards sophisticated copy with a glaring contradiction that Bayon wrestles with.
Which is?
If the style is so much more refined now, why do professional copywriters still lean so heavily on ancient, seemingly exhausted cliches?
Yeah. I was hoping you'd bring that up. Because reading some of the lists in the book, I almost winced. Like if I see the phrase, works like magic, or right at your fingertips on another landing page, my eyes might roll out of my skull.
It feels lazy, right?
Very. Yet Bayon actively defends keeping these hoary veteran phrases in the toolkit. What is the mechanism that allows works like magic to survive while other advertising trends go extinct?
It survives because it bypasses the sophisticated, critical part of your brain. It mainlines directly into your primal evolutionary programming.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, while the surface style of communication has evolved, the core preoccupations of the human species haven't moved an inch in 10,000 years.
So we're still just cavemen with iPhones.
Essentially, yes. We are biologically wired to obsess over status, security, comfort, and, crucial here, the conservation of energy.
We want things easy.
We are driven by a deep-seated fear of pain and an insatiable appetite for instant gratification.
So a phrase like right at your fingertips isn't just lazy writing.
No, it's a targeted strike on our desire for total environmental control with zero physical exertion.
And works like magic does the exact same thing then.
Precisely. It is the ultimate promise of friction-free problem solving. It suggests that a complex, frustrating aspect of your life will be eradicated without any labor on your part.
And even though your critical brain recognizes it as a cliche, your primal brain just hears the promise of a saved resource.
And immediately pays attention.
Right. But Bayon does draw a line. He talks about weeding out certain phrases that have lost their psychological teeth.
The ones that sound like relics of the Eisenhower administration.
Yeah, like his prime example is seeing is believing. He jokes that you only hear that in scattered nursing homes now.
Which is true.
But why? Why does seeing is believing die while works like magic thrives?
Because seeing is believing is an appeal to logic. It's a dusty idiom about empirical evidence. It doesn't trigger a primal emotion, it just states a rather boring fact.
Oh, whereas works like magic triggers a fantasy.
Exactly. Persuasive language must always skew toward the emotional payout rather than the logical process.
That's a great distinction. And that brings us to the foundational rules Bayon lays out before you even select a single word from his lists. He gives this crash course in the philosophy of selling language.
Right. And rule number 1 is that you must gain firsthand knowledge of the product.
Which honestly sounds almost insultingly obvious. Like, of course you have to know what you're writing about.
It sounds obvious, yet it is the most frequently violated principle in corporate communication. Absolutely. You cannot manufacture the visceral, granular details that actually persuade a human being if you're only working from a spec sheet provided by the engineering department.
So you need that sensory interaction.
Bayon insists on it. If it's a physical product, you hold it, smell it, use it until it breaks. If it's a software service, you run it until you find the frustrating bugs.
Because the data is secondary.
Exactly. The primary goal is to undergo a radical perspective shift.
A shift from the creator to the consumer.
Yes, the creator cares about how hard it was to build. They care about the proprietary algorithm or the patented manufacturing process.
But the consumer does not care about any of that.
Not even a little bit.
Uh,
The consumer only asks one ruthless question. How does this alleviate my pain or elevate my status?
which means copywriting is fundamentally an act of deep psychological research and really profound empathy. You have to climb inside the specific anxieties of your target demographic.
And if you don't have that empathy, you fall into a specific linguistic trap Beyond warns against. He calls it the hazy abstraction.
Ugh, the then what trap. This is where so much modern B2B marketing completely falls apart.
It really is the hallmark of lazy writing. It relies on these open-ended comparative adjectives. A company will proudly state their product lasts longer, cleans better, or gets the job done faster.
Faster than what? Longer than what?
That is exactly the cognitive friction it creates.
Yeah.
When you leave the comparison unresolved, you force the reader's brain to do the heavy lifting to fill in the blank.
And the human brain hates doing unnecessary work.
It despises it. So instead of visualizing the benefit, the brain simply flags the statement as meaningless marketing jargon and discards it.
You have to anchor the comparison, like gets the job done faster than a manual spreadsheet, gives the brain a concrete visual delta.
Concrete visuals are everything.
Which brings up my absolute favorite example from this section of the book. It's just a masterclass in specificity. Bayan asks the reader to compare two descriptions of a product. Would you rather eat a frozen dessert or a raspberry ice?
The neurological difference between reading those two phrases is staggering.
It really is. Frozen dessert is a taxonomic categorization. It's sterile.
It appeals entirely to the analytical left hemisphere of the brain. You cannot taste a frozen dessert.
But raspberry ice instantly activates the gustatory cortex.
It activates sensory memory. Just hearing the word raspberry conjures a highly specific color, a tart flavor profile, a texture.
And the word ice reinforces the temperature.
Right. The adjective does the heavy lifting of persuasion by hijacking your sensory recall. You aren't just reading information, you are experiencing a simulated reality.
I completely agree with the psychology there. But, this is where I have to push back hard on Bayan's philosophy.
Oh, fear it.
Because later in that same section, he strongly cautions against using what he calls empty overstatements. He says you shouldn't use words like fabulous or fantastic because it destroys your credibility.
He says you sound like a propagandist.
Exactly. But look at the modern internet. Look at influencer marketing, TikTok Shop, or YouTube thumbnails. The entire multi-billion-dollar creator economy is built on screaming hyperbolic overstatements.
That's true.
This is the most insane product I have ever used, and it works spectacularly well. So is Bayan just out of touch with the modern hyper-stimulated audience?
It's a crucial tension to examine. You are identifying a very real phenomenon, but we have to separate short-term attention arbitrage from long-term persuasion and credibility.
Okay, unpack that.
What you're describing on platforms like TikTok is a race to the bottom of the brainstem. It relies on parasocial relationships and shock value to generate impulse buys for low-ticket items.
Right.
If an influencer screams that a $20 lip gloss is mind-blowing, you might buy it just for the dopamine hit of the transaction.
Sure, but you wouldn't buy a $20,000 enterprise software package because a guy in a brightly colored thumbnail screamed that it was fabulous.
Exactly. The friction economics change entirely based on the risk associated with the decision. Bayan's rule is about sustained credibility.
Okay, that makes sense.
And his advice on how to handle the concept of fabulous is arguably the most elegant distillation of persuasion in the entire book. He writes, try to convince the audience that your product is fabulous. Make them say, that's really fantastic.
So you don't tell them the verdict, you present the evidence.
Yes. If you declare the product is fantastic, you are forcing an unearned conclusion on the reader. You trigger their defense mechanisms.
Oh, I see.
Instead, you use the raspberry ice sensory details. You use concrete nouns and aggressive action verbs to paint a picture of a benefit so undeniable and so precisely tailored to their pain points that the reader's internal monologue organically supplies the word fantastic.
Because when the reader generates the conclusion themselves, it's bulletproof. They've persuaded themselves.
Exactly. You provide the flawless logic and the sensory triggers, and they close the deal in their own head.
That's brilliant. But Bayan is also very clear that where you are presenting this evidence fundamentally alters how you present it. The medium heavily dictates the message.
He breaks down the different vehicles of copy really well.
Yeah, and the contrast between a physical brochure and a direct sales letter is fascinating.
Let's isolate the brochure as an artifact. Think about the physical context of interacting with a brochure. You're likely at a trade show, standing in a lobby, or sifting through a stack of mail.
Right, your cognitive state is fragmented.
Bayon correctly identifies that a brochure's primary function is not to seduce with a long narrative. A brochure appeals to the intellect.
It's an informational fortress. You don't read it like a novel. From page 1 to page 4, you hunt.
You scan. Therefore, the language and the typography must facilitate frictionless data retrieval. You rely heavily on subheads, bulleted lists, and call-out boxes.
The prose must be ruthlessly logical. It's a reference document designed to confirm a desire that's likely already been planted.
But the sales letter is a completely different animal.
Bayonne calls it potentially your most effective selling tool because it appeals directly to the emotions.
It mimics a one-on-one pitch, but without the immediate social pressure of a salesperson sitting in your office refusing to leave.
Which is the worst.
The worst. But the sales letter allows for the injection of a living, breathing personality. You abandon the rigid corporate lexicon. You throw out phrases like, as per your request, or please find enclosed.
You adopt everyday speech patterns, like those contractions we discussed earlier.
Exactly. It is an intimate, asymmetric conversation. And to manage the psychological friction of this format, copywriters developed a brilliant structural tool known as the Johnson box.
The Johnson box. I have seen these on hundreds of sales letters and never knew they had a name.
Most people don't.
It's those few lines of boldface, centered text sitting at the very top of the letter before the "Dear So-and-so" that explicitly summarize the core offer. But why is that specific placement so critical?
Think of the Johnson box as a cognitive pressure valve.
A pressure valve, okay.
When a reader opens a piece of mail or clicks a link and is confronted with a massive, dense block of text, their amygdala spikes. It represents a massive cognitive load.
The brain immediately asks, how much of my finite time and energy will this consume, and what do they want from me?
Exactly. And if that question isn't answered instantly, the reader bails.
They throw it right in the trash.
But the Johnson box intercepts that anxiety. By immediately summarizing the ultimate benefit and the core offer at the very top, it acts as an executive summary.
It gives the brain permission to relax.
Yes. Once the reader knows the why and the what, they can comfortably settle in to read the how in the paragraphs below. You have anchored their curiosity and removed the threat of the unknown.
That makes total sense. It's like the thesis statement in an essay, but weaponized for sales. Now, moving from print to the digital space, Bayonne has a description of website visitors that I think should be framed on the wall of every UX designer.
Oh, I know one.
He says web surfers act like jackrabbits hopping around as their whims dictate.
It is the defining behavioral characteristic of the digital environment.
And because of that jackrabbit momentum, web copy cannot afford the luxury of a slow, atmospheric buildup.
You absolutely cannot bury the lead. The homepage must function as a series of pithy, high-impact teaser statements designed to arrest momentum and force a click.
So a website is not merely a digital catalog.
No, it's a rapid-fire brand statement that must instantly communicate value before the user's thumb twitches toward the back button.
Which brings us to a digital medium Bayonne highly praises, e-zines, or what we would now just call email newsletters.
Right.
He argues they're incredibly effective because they lower the reader's defensive shields. You aren't pitching them in every sentence. You're providing offbeat, informative, chatty content.
We can map this directly onto Gary Vaynerchuk's jab, 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 right hook theory of modern social media marketing. The psychology is identical.
Yeah, a hard sell is a withdrawal from the trust bank account. You cannot continually withdraw without making deposits.
And the newsletter provides value, entertainment, insider knowledge, curated news. Those are the deposits. Those are the jabs.
You are building a parasocial relationship.
Precisely. You build habituation and trust. So when you finally execute the right hook, the call to action, the product launch, the premium subscription request, it doesn't trigger the defense mechanisms associated with a cold pitch.
It just feels like a natural recommendation from a trusted advisor.
Exactly.
Okay, but let's look at the absolute dark side of digital friction. Bayonne mentions pop-up ads. And he does not mince words here. He calls them the scourge of the internet.
A very apt description.
He describes them as pesky intruders that actively hurt the cause of advertising. So here's my question.
Okay.
If they are universally loathed, if users install ad blockers specifically to destroy them, and if even marketing experts consider them a scourge, Why are they still ubiquitous? Why does every single modern website immediately throw a giant pop-up in my face asking for my email before I've even read a single sentence?
Because advertising is a constant, agonizing tightrope walk between capturing attention and managing offense.
Yeah.
A pop-up is essentially an act of digital violence. It intercepts user intent. It forces a pause. And purely from a statistical standpoint, that forced pause generates conversions.
So it's just a numbers game.
Yes. A small percentage of those jackrabbits will input their email address just to clear the screen, or because the lead magnet offered in the pop-up triggered an impulse.
So the math works in the short term.
The math works if you're only measuring immediate capture rates, but Band's underlying warning is about the hidden cost. It is a highly high-friction strategy.
Because every time you annoy a prospect, you degrade your brand equity.
Exactly. You might extract an email address, but you associate your brand with frustration and interruption. You win the battle of the micro-conversion, but you severely damage the long-term war for loyalty and trust.
It's the equivalent of physically jumping in front of someone's car on the highway to hand them a flyer. Like, yes, you successfully made them stop. Yes, they took the flyer. But they are absolutely furious with you, and they certainly aren't going to buy what you're selling.
That is a perfect, terrifying analogy.
Well, let's transition into the actual anatomy of the pitch itself, because the core of words that sell is organized chronologically, mirroring the psychological progression of a successful sales argument.
Yeah.
And it begins, logically, with grabbers.
The grabber is the snare. It's the headline, the email subject line, the opening hook of a presentation. The objective is singular and ruthless. You must pull the audience into the message by whatever means necessary.
And Bayon provides highly specific tactical structures for these openings. One of the most prominent is leading with a question. Could you use an extra $1,000 each month, or are you still paying too much for your car insurance?
We see those everywhere.
We do, but why is a question structurally superior to simply stating, we can save you $1,000 a month?
Because a statement allows for passive consumption. You can read a statement and immediately discard it. A question, however, forces involuntary cognitive engagement.
The human brain is basically an answering machine.
Yes. When confronted with a question, even a glaringly rhetorical one, the brain instinctively begins to formulate a response.
You literally can't help but answer it in your head.
Exactly. Could I use an extra $1,000? The internal voice says, yes. Am I tired of being exhausted all the time? The internal voice says, yes.
And by forcing that internal yes, the copywriter has accomplished something profound.
They have initiated a pattern of agreement. They have transformed a monologue into a dialogue. The reader is now an active participant in the narrative.
He also highlights provocative statements that rely on information gaps, like, forget everything you've heard about real estate investing, or I'm extremely pleased to tell you a secret that.
It creates this itch in the brain that can only be scratched by reading the next sentence.
But the real heavy hitters are what Bayon labels the all-purpose grabbers. These are the single words that carry an immense psychological payload. Words like free, exclusive, breakthrough, and secret.
Those words are the skeleton keys of human psychology.
Skeleton keys. I like that.
They bypass the prefrontal cortex, the logical analytical center, and plug directly into the limbic system.
Let's break down why. Take the word free.
Free completely eliminates the concept of risk. The brain is obsessed with loss aversion. Every purchase involves a micro-calculation of potential regret. Free shuts down that calculation entirely.
There is no downside, therefore, the defense mechanisms deactivate.
Precisely.
What about exclusive?
Exclusive triggers our evolutionary drive for status and tribal belonging. It applies a hierarchy, and it offers the reader a position at the top of that hierarchy, separated from the masses.
And secret.
Secret leverages the primal power of curiosity, but more importantly, it offers an asymmetric advantage.
Because if I know a secret that others don't, I have a competitive edge in survival or resource gathering.
Yes. These words aren't just adjectives, they're psychological leverage points.
So once you've successfully snared them with a grabber, you have to transition to the core of the pitch. Descriptions and benefits.
This is where the magic really happens.
Yeah. The book contains massive glossaries for this phase, categorized by the exact angle you're pursuing. And what becomes immediately clear is how dramatically the vocabulary must shift depending on the context of the product. It's like changing the filter on a camera.
The vocabulary must mirror the desired psychological end state of the consumer.
Give me an example.
Okay, if we look at this section categorized as results performance, which you would use for a heavy-duty cleaning product,
Yep.
an antivirus software, or a pest control service, The verbs are overtly militaristic.
The list is wild. It's words like zaps, wipes out, tackles the dirtiest jobs, stamps out, foils, obliterates.
Because in that context, the consumer used the problem dirt, viruses, roaches as an invading enemy.
Right, they don't want a passive tool, they want an aggressive champion.
Words like zaps or obliterates promise a violent, decisive, and final victory over chaos. They convey maximum force with minimal user effort.
Zaps is brilliant because it also sounds instantaneous. It's electric. But then, if you pivot to a completely different industry, say you are selling a corporate leadership retreat, a master class, or an aspirational self-improvement book, that aggressive language would be deeply off-putting.
The vocabulary has to expand. Because the goal is no longer destruction, it is liberation.
Right. Look at the verbs Bayan curates for self-improvement. Unlock your potential. Discover your hidden talents. Taps your inner strength. Visualize your success. Awaken.
It sounds like a meditation app.
It really does.
And it has to. You are speaking to the consumer's ego and their unfulfilled aspirations. The language must feel expansive, deeply personal, and inherently optimistic.
You aren't destroying a problem. You are revealing an asset that the consumer already possesses but hasn't been able to access.
Exactly. And then the filter changes again when we enter the realm of luxury. Selling a high-end watch, fine art, or a luxury vehicle requires a completely different set of psychological triggers.
Because you aren't selling utility.
Right. You are selling indispensability and rarity.
The luxury lexicon is built entirely around establishing a new baseline of normalcy. The lists include phrases like a masterpiece, irreplaceable, incalculable value, flawless museum quality.
But the crown jewel of the luxury section is a specific phrase Bain highlights. You'll wonder how you ever got along without it.
That phrase is so manipulative but so effective. Why does that work so well on a high-ticket item?
It's an application of advanced loss aversion. Normally, loss aversion prevents a sale because the buyer is afraid of losing their money.
Right.
This phrase flips the script. It frames the luxury item not as an extravagant indulgence, but as a critical necessity that you have been tragically, painfully deprived of until this very moment.
So it creates a phantom sense of loss for something you don't even own yet.
Exactly. It justifies the massive price tag, but suggesting that your previous life without this object was fundamentally deficient.
Wow.
It alters the paradigm so that purchasing the object is merely restoring you to your rightful baseline of happiness.
So we've grabbed their attention with an information gap. We've pitched the benefits using the exact right sensory, militaristic, or aspirational vocabulary.
Now we reach the critical friction point.
Closing the deal. The clincher. And this brings us to what I consider the most fascinating, counterintuitive tactic in the entire book. The lift note.
The lift note. This is a masterstroke of direct mail psychological judo.
I need us to really dissect this because on the surface, it makes absolutely zero sense. For the listener who isn't familiar, a lift note is a physical artifact. In a traditional direct mail package, you get a big envelope in the mail with a brochure, a sales letter, an order form.
A lot of paper.
Yeah, and tucked inside all of that is a smaller, separate, often brightly colored folded slip of paper. And printed on the outside of this slip is some variation of this phrase. Please do not open unless you have already decided not to order.
It is the ultimate big red button labeled, "Do not push."
Which is insane. You have spent thousands of dollars getting this package into someone's hands, and you put a note inside explicitly telling them not to read it.
But you know they're going to.
Of course. Human nature dictates that I am going to open it immediately. What is the psychological strategy once they rip that note open?
The strategy relies on manufactured vulnerability and radical empathy. When a consumer reaches the end of a pitch and decides not to buy, their primary emotional state is skepticism.
They think, this is too good to be true, there is a catch, they are trying to trick me.
Exactly. When they open the lift note, the copywriter addresses that exact skepticism head-on.
The text usually says something like, frankly, I'm puzzled, or I understand your concern, or maybe you feel there's some hidden catch.
By giving voice to the reader's internal hesitation, the copywriter executes a brilliant, disarming maneuver. A scammer, a grifter, never admits that their offer looks suspicious. A scammer only pushes harder. By predicting the objection and validating it, I know you think this is risky. The seller proves they possess deep empathy for the buyer. It builds instantaneous trust.
It's like the 8-mile defense. You call out your own weaknesses before the opponent can use them against you.
That is a perfect analogy. You own the objection, And once you have vocalized that hesitation and built that bridge of trust, you immediately pivot to the clincher, the absolute removal of all friction.
This is where the ironclad guarantees are deployed. 100% satisfaction or your money back. Keep the free gifts even if you cancel. You don't pay a dime until you've tested it for 30 days.
The lift note says, I see your fear, I validate your fear, and now I am structurally removing the source of your fear.
It corners the logical brain. It forces the undecided reader to realize that mathematically there is no downside to saying yes.
It pushes them right over the response threshold.
It is a stunning piece of behavioral engineering, but here is where we need to bring this entire deep dive home for the listener, because the vast majority of people listening to us right now are not writing direct mail packages for magazine subscriptions.
No, probably not.
They aren't selling raspberry ice, and they aren't writing pop-up ads for sauce products. They are accountants, project managers, engineers, teachers. They might be thinking, this is a fascinating look at how I am manipulated as a consumer, but how does this apply to my 9-to-5 life?
This is perhaps the most vital section of Beyond's work, and it circles back to our opening premise. We are all constantly acting as copywriters.
Yes.
The final chapters of the source material are explicitly dedicated to selling yourself and selling your ideas. The linguistic physics of persuasion do not disappear when you walk into an office building.
When you draft a resume, when you send a delicate email to a superior, when you ask for a raise, you are engaging in the exact same act of overcoming friction and motivating action.
Let's start with the resume, because Beyond frames it beautifully. A resume is essentially a self-mailer.
It is a direct response advertisement where the product is you. You have one single piece of paper or one PDF to serve as the grabber, outline the benefits, and drive a specific call to action.
Which is picking up the phone to schedule an interview.
Right, and yet, how do most professionals write their resumes? They fill them with what Bayan warned us about: hazy abstractions and passive language.
The frozen dessert of corporate speak.
Exactly. People write bullet points like, was responsible for managing a team, or helped with the new software implementation, or tasked with overseeing daily operations.
That language is structurally weak. It describes a state of existence, not an impact. It is entirely unpersuasive.
You want to serve them the raspberry ice version of your career, and Bayan provides an incredible glossary of action verbs specifically for this purpose. Instead of saying you were responsible for a project, you write that you spearheaded it.
Instead of saying you fixed a system, you overhauled it. You pinpointed an inefficiency. You negotiated a vendor contract.
Just listen to the kinetic energy in those verbs. Revitalized, maximized, engineered, expedited, transformed, catalyzed.
These are the professional equivalents of the militaristic cleaning verbs we discussed earlier.
Yes.
They convey absolute ownership and decisive momentum. They signal to the hiring manager that you do not passively occupy a role waiting for instructions. You actively alter your environment for the better.
You are presenting yourself as a high-performance, friction-reducing asset.
Let's apply this to a specific everyday scenario. Imagine you're a project manager and a major deliverable is going to be late. You have to send an email to a furious client or a stressed-out VP.
Oh, the dreaded email. The instinct for most people is to use passive defensive language, like, I'm sorry to inform you that the deadline has been missed due to unforeseen circumstances regarding the design team.
That email is a disaster.
It really is.
It triggers anxiety, it deflects blame vaguely, and it offers no resolution. It is the exact opposite of persuasion. If we apply Bayan's principles, we treat this email like a sales letter where the product we are selling is our competence and control of the situation.
Okay, so how do we rewrite it using the magic kit?
We use an active grabber that acknowledges the reality without groveling, and we immediately pivot to performance verbs and forward momentum.
Okay, give me an example.
I am writing to realign our deployment schedule. We have pinpointed a structural bottleneck in the design phase. To ensure the final deliverable meets our benchmark for quality, I have expedited additional resources to the design team and restructured the remaining milestones. We will launch on Thursday.
Wow. The difference is night and day. The first email sounds like a victim.
And the second email sounds like an architect of solutions. Even though the news is bad, the language makes the reader feel secure.
That leads directly into the vocabulary Bayan curates for selling your ideas internally. The boardroom pitch. He includes words like synergy, benchmark, outside the box, focal point, paradigm, leverage.
Now, I have to pause here.
Why?
Because if a middle manager stands up in a meeting and tells me we need to leverage our synergy to create an outside-the-box paradigm shift, my brain is going to shut down entirely. Hasn't a lot of this vocabulary crossed the line into unbearable corporate cliché?
That's an entirely valid critique. Words possess a life cycle, and when highly effective persuasive terms are endlessly parroted by unpersuasive people trying to sound smart, they degrade into hollow jargon.
Right.
However, we have to separate the specific word from the underlying strategic intent. The lesson from Bayon is not to blindly copy-paste the read synergy into a PowerPoint slide. The lesson is about structural framing.
Explain that distinction. What is the structural framing of a word like leverage?
When you pitch an idea, your audience, your boss, the board is silently calculating risk. They are calculating the cost of change. If you say, I think we should combine the marketing and sales databases because it might be better, you are presenting a vague, unquantifiable risk. But if you say, integrating these databases creates a measurable synergy that allows us to leverage our existing data to maximize conversion rates, you are doing something entirely different.
You are framing the idea as a mechanical advantage.
Yes. Words like leverage, maximize, and integrate reframe your subjective opinion into an objective, structural, and measurable benefit to the company's bottom line. Even if the words flirt with corporate cliché, using active, forward-looking architectural vocabulary ensures you are perceived as a decisive leader.
You're essentially applying the psychological rules of a lift note and the grabber to the conference room. You are minimizing perceived risk while maximizing perceived gain.
So what does this all mean when we step back and look at the whole picture? What is the grand synthesis of Richard Bayon's bottomless tackle box?
What I am taking away from this deep dive is that true effective persuasion, the kind that moves markets, wins jobs, and endures across decades, isn't about deception.
Yeah.
It isn't about stringing together flowery adjectives or trying to bludgeon someone into submission with exclamation points.
The ultimate irony of a book called Words That Sell is that it reveals persuasion is barely about the words at all.
It is about deep, radical empathy. It requires the ego death of the writer. You have to stop caring about what you want to say and care obsessively about what the audience needs to hear.
You have to understand their primal drives, their fears, a cognitive load, and their desires.
And once you possess that empathy, the words simply become the structural tools, the magic kit to guide them. You organize your specific verbs, your frictionless guarantees, and your sensory details to build a logical and emotional pathway.
You don't shove them down the path. You illuminate it so clearly that they walk down it themselves. You make them feel the benefit so intensely that they are the ones who conclude, this is fantastic.
Which leaves us with a final challenge for the listener, a way to test this newfound matrix vision.
Lay it on us.
The very next time you open your inbox, or you are scrolling through a feed, and a sponsored post catches your eye. The next time you feel that sudden, undeniable urge to click or subscribe or pull out your credit card, I want you to freeze. Stop for 10 agonizing seconds.
Don't look at the picture of the product. Don't look at the price.
Look strictly at the syntax. Look at the architecture. Ask yourself, what specific primal emotion is that single adjective trying to trigger?
Is the headline using a question to force my internal agreement?
Is the copy relying on a then-what comparison to obscure a lack of evidence? Is it serving me frozen dessert or raspberry ice?
Where is the Johnson box? What does the lift note say?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Deconstruct the bait. Because once you learn to see the invisible strings pulling the puppet, a profound shift occurs. You are no longer just a passive consumer reacting to the code.
You become a practitioner. You understand the mechanics of human motivation.
And once you understand the mechanics, you can finally pick up that tackle box and you can start pulling the strings yourself.
Every day, you are being sold to, pitched, and just generally persuaded by, everyone around you. But what if you could actually peek inside the very magic kit the experts use to do it?
I mean, if you did, you'd realize that the last time you bought, like, a meticulously crafted coffee or clicked on an email with a suspiciously blank subject line, you were being guided by this very specific and almost invisible architecture of persuasion.
Right. And today, we are pulling back the curtain on that exact architecture. We're doing a deep dive into this fascinating reference text that acts as basically a secret weapon for marketers and copywriters.
Yeah, it's a book called Words That Sell by Richard Bayon. Specifically, we're looking at the revised and expanded edition.
And, when I first looked at this source material, I completely expected a traditional business book. I was bracing myself for long chapters, rigid thesis statements, endless corporate case studies.
Right, the usual dry stuff.
Exactly. But it is absolutely none of those things. It's honestly more like a bottomless tackle box filled with these glittering, perfectly engineered fishing lures.
That's a great way to describe it. Because, the author notes that this didn't even start as a book.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Decades ago, it began as a literal box full of index cards that he just kept on his desk while working as a copywriter.
Oh, wow. Just like a personal cheat sheet?
Exactly. And over 20 years, it just evolved and expanded. And today, it operates as this desktop staple, not just for ad agencies, but for, you know, PR professionals, CEOs, webmasters, basically anyone who relies on getting a point across effectively.
So let's look at the core philosophy that drove Bayon to create those index cards in the first place. Because he approaches words not as art, but as tools.
Right. Think of it like a carpenter framing a house. If that carpenter spends 40% of their day just wandering around the workshop trying to find a hammer.
The house doesn't get built.
Exactly. The house doesn't get built. Bayon's premise is that when you sit down at a keyboard and you're just staring at that blinking cursor, groping through your brain for the perfect adjective to make your proposal sound good, you are wasting cognitive energy.
You're wandering the workshop.
Yes. Having a curated, categorized list of potent words frees up your mind. You don't have to invent the hammer. You just reach into the toolkit and grab it.
Which leaves your mind completely free to focus on the actual task, right? Like shaping a cohesive message that actually generates an enthusiastic response.
Precisely.
So our mission for this deep dive is to decode that specific toolkit. We are going to extract the foundational rules of effective copywriting that the text lays out, and then examine the psychological triggers and the frameworks that make promotional writing irresistible.
And, you might be wondering why this matters to you if your job title doesn't have the word marketing in it.
Oh, absolutely.
The reality is, even if you never write a billboard or a television commercial in your life, you are constantly trying to get people to pay attention to your ideas.
Right. If you're pitching a new initiative to your boss, or writing a critical email to a client who's dragging their feet, or even just trying to negotiate in your daily life, you are selling.
You're asking someone to trade their time, their attention, or their resources for whatever it is you are offering.
And to do that successfully, you really have to understand human psychology. I mean, the source material masquerades as a thesaurus, but it's actually this profound manual on human desire.
It really is. To know which words sell, you first have to understand what people fundamentally want and, honestly, what they fear.
Yeah. So before we open up the tackle box and look at the specific magic words, we need to understand the rules of the magic trick itself.
The ground rules, yeah.
Right. The source material begins with a crash course in the philosophy of persuasion, like what separates effective, persuasive copy from manipulative, sleazy fluff. And the text starts with what it positions as the golden rule. Sell the benefit, not the feature.
It explicitly warns against thumping your chest on behalf of your company.
Which is such a common trap.
But it's incredibly common. A company spends, millions of dollars and years of research developing a product, so naturally they want to talk about how great their engineering is.
They want to say, look at us. Look at these amazing specifications we achieved.
Exactly. But the text argues that the reader does not care about your company. I mean, we are inherently self-interested creatures. From an evolutionary standpoint, our brains are wired to constantly scan the environment and run this background calculation of what is in this for me.
Right. So a feature is simply a factual statement about a product, but a benefit is the translation of that fact into an improved reality for the user.
Yes.
Let's create a hypothetical scenario to ground this. Imagine we are tasked with writing copy for a new, super high-end ergonomic office chair. If I lead with the features, I might write something like, this chair features a dynamic multi-tilt synchro mechanism with aerospace-grade aluminum construction and a breathable, high-tension mesh backrest.
And the moment a prospective buyer reads that, their eyes just completely glaze over.
But why, though? Those are impressive technical specifications. Why doesn't the brain engage with them?
Because the brain has to do way too much work to translate those technical specs into a personal advantage. You're asking the reader to understand what a multi-tilt synchro mechanism is, and then independently deduce how it might actually affect their daily life.
And people are just too busy.
Right. Their attention is too fractured to do that translation work for you. You have to do it for them. The text emphasizes that you must show potential customers how the product will make them happier or wealthier or more comfortable.
So instead of talking about the synchro mechanism, you translate that feature into the benefit. So the benefit-driven version would be, imagine finishing an 8-hour workday without a single ache in your lower back. You'll leave your desk feeling energized and completely pain-free no matter how long you sit.
Precisely. You've bypassed the engineering entirely and painted a picture of an emotional and physical outcome.
It's a totally different vibe.
It is. The psychological shift from company-centric writing like, look at our aerospace aluminum, to customer-centric writing, wake up without back pain, is the entire foundation of persuasion. Beyond argues that once you successfully make that shift in your thinking, you have won half the battle.
Okay, but if we are painting these wonderful pictures of pain-free lives and energized workdays, how do we avoid sounding like, snake oil salespeople?
Wait, nobody wants to sound like a late-night infomercial.
Exactly. And the text follows up with Rule 2, show, don't tell, which is entirely about avoiding empty overstatements. Bayon warns against stringing together empty words like fabulous and fantastic.
Think about the friction that occurs when you read an ad that just screams, our new product is absolutely fantastic and incredible.
It sounds desperate.
It does, because it relies on the writer commanding the reader to feel a certain way. And human beings naturally resist being commanded. When you use words like fantastic, you are telling the reader what conclusion they should reach before you've provided any actual evidence.
You want the reader to be the one to say, wow, that's fabulous, rather than you telling them it is.
Exactly. When you describe, say, the crisp snap of a fresh apple, the rush of cold juice, and the perfect balance of tart and sweet, the reader's brain generates the feeling of desire on its own.
Right. They conclude that the apple sounds fantastic.
And a conclusion that someone arrives at independently is infinitely more powerful and permanent than a conclusion you try to force-feed them.
I have to challenge this concept just a bit, though, because we live in a media landscape that is completely saturated with hyperbole. Isn't advertising almost by definition a form of hype?
It can feel that way, yes.
So where does the text draw the line between a writer just being enthusiastic about their offering and crossing over into pure propaganda?
Well, the text draws that line very clearly at truth and specificity, which actually brings us to Rule 3. Be specific and accurate. Propaganda demands belief without evidence. Persuasion provides compelling evidence and allows the reader to assemble the belief themselves. If you cross into propaganda by making baseless, exaggerated claims, you might win a momentary burst of attention, but you completely lose the audience's trust.
And trust is everything.
Trust is the only currency that actually facilitates a transaction, whether you're transacting money or time or just agreement.
The examples the book provides for Rule 3 really highlight how lazy writing erodes that trust. Like, it points out the major flaw of what it calls then what comparison.
We love this part.
Yeah, an ad will boldly claim, our batteries last longer, or a detergent will say, gets the job done faster. And Bayon suggests the immediate subconscious question the reader asks is, then what?
Right. Lasts longer than a block of ice, gets the job done faster than doing it by hand.
Exactly. It's a totally hollow claim.
It assumes the consumer will just mentally fill in the blank with the leading competitor's product. But because the writer wasn't brave enough, or maybe legally secure enough to name the competitor or provide a specific metric, it leaves the statement wide open to skepticism.
Specificity is the antidote to skepticism.
Yes, if you say, last 4 hours longer than the leading brand, you have made a verifiable, specific claim.
The text also stresses the difference between hazy abstractions and vivid, observable details. The classic example Bayon gives is comparing the phrase frozen dessert to raspberry ice.
That example perfectly illustrates how our brains process language. I mean, frozen dessert is a categorization. It sounds like a manufactured, sterile concept.
It sounds like something you'd see on a government form.
Right. It requires the brain to analyze it intellectually. Raspberry ice, on the other hand, evokes color, temperature, flavor, and freshness all at once.
But why does raspberry ice hit so much harder? Is it literally just because it sounds prettier?
It's actually neurological. Think of your brain like a massive, complex switchboard. Abstract, hazy words like dessert or product or solution leave the switchboard relatively dark. They only light up the basic language processing centers.
Okay.
But specific sensory words like raspberry, ice, crunch, or velvet actually light up the sensory cortices of the brain.
Wait, really? The brain physically reacts differently?
Yes. When you read the word raspberry, the gustatory cortex, which handles taste, and the olfactory cortex, which handles smell, exhibit subtle neural firing. The reader almost tastes it. You force the reader to simulate the experience of the product simply through specific language.
Wow. So specificity isn't just about avoiding legal trouble for false advertising, though the text notes it protects you there as well. Specificity is about forcing the reader's brain to actually simulate the reality of what you're offering.
Exactly. It builds trust because it demonstrates that you possess intimate knowledge of what you're talking about, and it anchors the concept in reality.
That brings us to Rule 4 in our crash course. Write for easy reading. The text dictates that copy must flow smoothly and rapidly. It needs to be crisp, clear, uncluttered, and extroverted in its tone.
Right. No convoluted sentences.
And as someone who writes every day, I can say that making things simple is often the most difficult part of the process. It's so much easier to write a complicated sentence than a simple one.
Oh, absolutely. It requires ruthless editing. There's this concept called cognitive load theory. Imagine your brain's short-term processing power is like the RAM in a computer. It has a limited capacity.
Okay, tracking with you.
Every complex word, every passive voice sentence, every piece of internal corporate jargon uses up a little bit of that RAM. If you write a convoluted passive sentence like, "It has been determined by our engineers that the functionality of the mechanism is optimized," the reader has to allocate RAM just to decipher the grammar.
Right, before they even get to the meaning.
Exactly. The moment the brain has to work too hard to understand a pitch, it experiences fatigue. And when a reader experiences fatigue, they don't push through it, they just abandon the text.
Think about the last time you drafted an important email to a busy colleague or a client. If you wanted them to actually read it and take action, you instinctively knew you had to strip out the friction. If you bury the essential request in the third paragraph of a dense block of text, it simply will not be read.
Yeah, a good piece of persuasive writing should have a relentless logical progression. Every sentence should exist solely to propel the reader to the next sentence, with zero speed bumps.
Okay, so we have established the rules of engagement. Sell the benefit rather than the feature. Show the outcome rather than telling them how to feel. Use vivid specificity to trigger the brain's sensory switchboard. And reduce the cognitive load by writing crisp, easy-to-read sentences.
That's the foundation.
But understanding the rules is only half the equation, right? Because you also have to understand the environment where these words are actually going to live.
Right, the medium itself drastically alters how a message is received.
And the text explores this through its categories of copy. So let's examine how the rules adapt to different environments. Bain starts with what he considers the traditional workhorse of the advertising world, direct mail packages.
Which is such a fascinating medium to study because it represents decades of intense, scientifically tracked A/B testing.
Like long before the internet.
Exactly. Before digital analytics even existed, direct mail was where copywriters learned exactly what worked and what failed, entirely based on actual return rates.
The text breaks down the anatomy of the direct mail package, and reading through it feels like analyzing a locked room mystery. Every single element is a clue designed to lead the consumer to one specific conclusion.
It's incredibly choreographed.
It is. First, you have the envelope teaser. This is the copy on the outside of the envelope designed to compel the recipient to open it. It might be a boisterous one-liner shouting "free" or asking a provocative question. But Mangan includes a fascinating caveat here. He notes that sometimes the most effective teaser is no teaser at all.
Right. The blank envelope strategy.
And I have to pause on that because if I go to my mailbox and find a completely blank white envelope with no return address, I'm highly suspicious. I'm probably throwing it directly into the recycling bin. So how is a blank envelope persuasive?
It works by exploiting the brain's pattern recognition systems and creating a curiosity gap.
A curiosity gap.
Yeah. When you sort your daily mail, your brain is operating on autopilot, categorizing items into important bills, personal letters, and junk ads. A giant red sticker that says "Urgent Free Offer" immediately flags the envelope as junk. The brain recognizes the pattern of an advertisement and discards it without a second thought.
Right, you don't even read the rest of it.
Exactly. But a plain white envelope, perhaps with just a street address for the return, that interrupts the pattern. The brain cannot immediately categorize it.
It's an anomaly.
It is.
Yeah.
Is it a tax document? Is it a wedding invitation? Is it a personal note from a neighbor? The ambiguity creates psychological tension. And the only way for the brain to resolve that tension and close the curiosity gap is to open the envelope. It uses restraint as a weapon.
That is so clever. So you get them to open the envelope, and inside they find the sales letter. The text calls the sales letter potentially the most effective selling tool in existence because it mimics a one-on-one personal pitch.
Yes.
And the golden rule Band stresses here is that it must use natural, unstilted speech. He specifically forbids corporate phrasings like "please find enclosed."
The moment you use a phrase like "please find enclosed," the illusion of a personal connection completely shatters. You instantly transform from a trusted advisor speaking directly to them into a faceless corporate entity processing a transaction. The sales letter is your opportunity to infuse the pitch with a living, breathing personality.
And to ensure the reader actually engages with this letter, the text highlights a specific structural tactic called the Johnson box.
Oh, a classic copywriting mechanism.
For those who don't know, the Johnson box consists of a few bold-faced lines positioned right at the top of a sales letter before the formal salutation even begins. It basically summarizes the core offer or the biggest benefit. Bayan notes that this box takes the pressure off the opening paragraphs.
Think of the Johnson box as an executive summary designed for the impatient, skeptical reader.
Which is everyone.
Right. When someone opens a letter, they don't start reading at word one. They scan, they look at the top, they look at the signature, they gauge how long it is. The Johnson box intercepts that scanning behavior.
It catches their eye.
Yes, it tells them immediately in 5 seconds why investing their time in reading the rest of the letter will actually benefit them. By lowering the threshold of commitment, saying, just read these 3 bold lines, you hook their interest. And once hooked, you've bought yourself the patience needed to build a more leisurely, comprehensive argument in the body of the letter.
But let's say the prospect reads the letter, flips through the enclosed brochure, and they remain unconvinced. They fold everything back up and are literally holding the package over the trash can. This is where we encounter the most fascinating piece of the direct mail anatomy, the lift note.
Ah, the psychological safety net.
The text describes the lift note as a smaller, separately folded piece of paper. On the outside, it usually bears a warning like, please do not open unless you have already decided not to order.
It's pure psychological judo.
Right. I mean, tell human nature not to open something.
It triggers that immediate rebellious instinct. If you put a big red button on a wall and put a sign next to it saying do not push, people will line up to push it.
Exactly. So they open it, defying the instruction. And inside, the writer adopts a tone of genuine confusion and mild guilt. The text gives an example phrase, frankly, I'm puzzled. I can't understand why everyone doesn't take advantage of this no-risk offer. It instantly reminds me of the classic television detective Columbo.
The Peter Falk character.
Right. Yes. If you watch an episode of Columbo, you see this brilliant interrogation technique. He questions the primary suspect, wraps up his notepad, puts on his rumpled trench coat, and walks all the way to the door.
Right.
And the suspect completely relaxes. They exhale, thinking they've outsmarted the detective and survived the encounter. Then, right at the threshold, Columbo stops, turns around and says, just one more thing, and drops a devastating piece of evidence that completely unravels the suspect's alibi. The lift note is the Columbo turn of copywriting.
There's a highly accurate analogy, honestly, because it captures the physiological state of the reader perfectly. When someone has reviewed a pitch and made the firm decision to say no, their cognitive defense mechanisms drop.
They relax.
Yes. They no longer feel like they are being sold to. They feel like they've survived the pitch. By catching them in that relaxed, unguarded state with a concise, almost vulnerable message like, frankly, I'm puzzled, you slip right past their armor. You address their lingering, unstated doubts directly. Perhaps you think there's a hidden catch. And then you dismantle that final objection while their guard is totally down.
Wow. So that covers the traditional physical medium. But the text also takes us deep into the digital arena. If the physical letter is a locked room mystery, what happens to these rules when the paper vanishes and the audience can disappear with a single click?
Well, the rules remain the same, but the velocity of execution changes dramatically because the digital medium naturally fractures our attention.
Let's look at websites. Bayan emphasizes that a website is not just a digital brochure or an online store, it is a holistic brand statement. And crucially, he notes that the copy on a website must be exceptionally brisk. Why? Because web surfers operate like jackrabbits hopping around as their whims dictate.
The internet is fundamentally an engine of distraction. In direct mail, the reader is physically holding the paper. You have a captive audience for at least a few seconds. On a website, the back button is an ever-present escape hatch resting just millimeters from the user's cursor.
That's a scary thought for a marketer.
It is. Every headline, every subheader, and every bullet point has to actively earn the right to the user's next 3 seconds of attention. If your opening paragraph is dense and passive, the jackrabbit bolts.
The text also addresses email sales letters. It acknowledges they're highly cost-effective since there's no postage or printing involved, but it highlights a massive psychological hurdle, overcoming the extreme public resistance to spam.
Which is huge.
Right. The text strongly advises only using opt-in lists where the recipient has explicitly asked to receive communication.
Because you have to contrast the psychology of email with a physical mailbox. We expect our physical mailboxes to contain a certain percentage of junk mail, It's a mild annoyance.
Yeah, you just toss it.
But an email inbox feels intimate. It is a personal sanctuary where we communicate with family, friends, and colleagues. When a marketer violates that sanctuary uninvited, the immediate emotional response isn't just disinterest, it is active hostility and anger.
You feel violated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is why building a list of prospects who have raised their hand and requested your emails is paramount. You transition from being an intruder to being an invited guest.
Which naturally leads to the strategy behind e-zines or, electronic newsletters. The book describes newsletters as a chatty, slightly offbeat approach to nurturing relationships over time. It's a space where customers can afford to let their guard down.
Because the newsletter is not constantly demanding a transaction. You aren't hard selling in every single paragraph. You are providing informative, entertaining, or valuable content that they actually look forward to receiving.
You're being useful.
Right. You're slowly depositing equity into the relationship, which you can later draw upon when you do finally have something to sell.
And finally, rounding out the digital arena, the text mentions pop-up ads. Beyond explicitly labels them the scourge of the internet.
A label they have rightly earned, I think.
Totally.
They are the ultimate uninvited guest. They interrupt the user's primary goal, whether that is reading an article or watching a video. And while they might occasionally generate accidental clicks, they actively damage a brand's long-term equity by associating the company with frustration and interruption.
So let's synthesize this section. When we look at all these different mediums, from the careful psychological choreography of a direct mail package to the jackrabbit speed of a landing page to the sanctuary of an inbox, what is the underlying variable that ties them all together?
The underlying variable is the velocity of trust.
The velocity of trust. I like that.
Yeah, the medium dictates exactly how much time you have to establish credibility.
Oh.
In a physical letter, you have pages and minutes to slowly build a narrative, establish empathy, and earn trust. On a website, you have a fraction of a second to catch the jackrabbit, prove you aren't a scam, and offer a clear benefit.
And in a newsletter, you are building trust incrementally over months of consistent contact.
Exactly. Your choice of words must scale to the velocity required by the medium.
So if the locked room mystery relies on the medium, how do we craft the actual clues? We understand the overarching rules. We understand the battlegrounds where these messages live. Now, we finally open the tackle box itself.
The fun part.
Let's look at the actual words. The book categorizes its massive arsenal into a very logical, sequential progression. Grabbers, descriptions, clinchers, and special strategies.
And this structure brilliantly mirrors the natural psychological progression of a successful pitch. First, you must arrest attention, then build desire, then remove fear, and finally establish authority.
Okay, let's start with part 1, grabbers. This section is entirely dedicated to winning that crucial first second of attention. These are the teasers for envelopes, the headlines for websites, the opening lines of a speech.
The hook.
Right. The text provides hundreds of examples, but let's analyze the mechanics behind a few specific categories. The first category relies on opening with questions. The text suggests phrases like, "Are you paying too much for blank?" Or, "Why trade a blank for a blank?" Or, "How much is your company spending on blank?"
A properly engineered question is arguably the most powerful tool a copywriter possesses.
I really want to dig into that. Why is a question so much more effective than simply making a bold declarative statement? Like, if I say, "You are paying too much for insurance," why is that weaker than asking, "Are you paying too much for insurance?"
It all comes down to social conditioning and the involuntary reflexes of the human brain. From early childhood, we are conditioned to respond when asked a question. It is a fundamental rule of social engagement.
Okay.
When you read a declarative statement like, "You are paying too much for insurance," your brain can easily reject it. It can say, "No, I'm not, my rate is fine," and just move on. The statement hits a wall.
Right, you get defensive.
Exactly. But when you read a question, "Are you paying too much for insurance?" your brain literally cannot help but search its internal database for the answer. It creates immediate, involuntary cognitive engagement.
Wow.
You force the reader to pause and reflect on their own specific situation. You pull them into a dialogue, even if that dialogue is occurring entirely silently within their own head. You just can't not answer a question.
That is fascinating. It bypasses the critical filter by initiating a reflex. Okay, what about the category of statements that imply hidden knowledge? The book lists grabbers like, "It's no secret that," what they don't want you to know about. Or the startling truth about.
Ah, those phrases leverage our deep-seated evolutionary drive for gossip and social currency.
Gossip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What they don't want you to know implies the existence of a conspiracy or just a powerful secret that you are currently being excluded from. Human beings are deeply uncomfortable with being left out of the loop. Knowledge is safety.
FOMO, basically.
Exactly. Primal FOMO. The phrase compels you to keep reading simply to satisfy the itch of curiosity and ensure you aren't at a disadvantage compared to everyone else.
The text also includes a category called snappy transitions. And I highlighted this because it is so incredibly useful for maintaining momentum, which ties back to the rule of easy reading we talked about earlier. These are phrases like, but let's take a closer look. What does this mean for you? Oh, here's where blank fits in. Or, as a further convenience.
Transitions are the lubrication in the engine of your copy. If cognitive load theory tells us that friction makes readers abandon the text, transitions prevent the reader from ever hitting a mental speed bump.
They keep the eyes moving down the page.
Yes. And the phrase, "what does this mean for you?" is particularly brilliant because it acts as a mechanical pivot. It explicitly drags the reader's attention from a technical feature directly into a personal benefit, ensuring they don't have to do the translation work themselves.
So, we have successfully grabbed their attention. We've asked the provocative question, we've hinted at the secret truth. Now we enter part 2, descriptions and benefits. The text notes, this is the real meat of the pitch. This is by far the largest section of the book, where those dry features are transformed into vivid benefits.
Right.
And Ban breaks these words down by thematic categories.
Which is so smart because examining these thematic lists is where you really see how language dictates psychological vibes or atmospheres.
Let's do an exercise. Let's trade some examples from the book. I will give you a thematic category. You read some of the specific phrases Ban recommends, and let's dissect the underlying socio-evolutionary triggers they hit.
Sounds fun.
Let's start with the category labeled durable solid.
All right, the text suggests phrases like virtually indestructible, practically bulletproof, shrugs off blank, designed for a lifetime of daily use, built to withstand the elements.
Just listening to those words, you get a visceral reaction. It sounds rugged, industrial. You can almost hear a heavy truck driving over the product.
You really can.
If you're selling a pair of work boots, a heavy-duty pickup truck, or even data backup software, those are the exact phonetic sounds and concepts that make a buyer feel secure.
Right, because it appeals to the desire for permanence and reliability in an unpredictable world. It tells the buyer that their investment is safe from chaos. Now, contrast that rugged, unyielding atmosphere with the category labeled easy.
Let's see. The text offers user-friendly, elegantly simple, takes the mystique out of a crash course in, you don't have to be an expert.
The emotional payload of those words is pure relief. It's all about lowering the barrier to entry.
Relief from what, though?
From anxiety. If you are selling a complex piece of accounting software or an online course about cryptocurrency investing, the biggest obstacle between you and the sale isn't the price. It is the customer's fear of incompetence.
Oh, that makes sense. They're terrified they will buy it and be too stupid to use it.
Exactly. These words act as a soothing psychological balm for that anxiety. And elegantly simple is just a masterpiece of a phrase.
Why does elegantly simple work better than just saying really easy?
Because nobody wants to feel like they need a product that has been dumbed down for them.
Right.
Really easy can imply that the product is basic or lacks power. Elegantly simple, on the other hand, implies that the simplicity is a deliberate feature of high-end, sophisticated design. It flatters the user while reassuring them at the same time.
That brings us perfectly to the luxurious category.
The vocabulary status.
The text lists phrases like meticulously handcrafted, museum quality, no expense has been spared, the epitome of a precious commodity.
Notice how the actual function of the product has completely disappeared in this list. When you use words like these, you are no longer selling what the product does. You are selling what the product says about the person who owns it. It relies heavily on signaling theory.
Can you explain signaling theory in this context?
Sure. In evolutionary biology and sociology, signaling theory explains how individuals communicate their fitness or status to others, often through costly displays.
Like a peacock's tail.
Exactly. A peacock's massive tail is a costly signal. It essentially says, I am so healthy I can afford to drag around these heavy feathers and still survive predators. In human commerce, luxury goods are costly signals.
So when you describe a watch as meticulously handcrafted,
Yeah.
you are justifying an exorbitant price tag.
Right. The buyer isn't paying for the ability to tell time. A $10 digital watch does that more accurately. They are paying for the artisan's time, the exclusivity, and the ability to signal to their peers that they possess the resources to acquire a precious commodity.
And finally, we reach the granddaddy of all the thematic lists, the money-making category.
The most primal and frequently exploited appeal in all of advertising.
The text provides these incredibly aggressive phrases. Turn your free time into profits. The fast track to wealth. Cash in on. Double your earnings. How rich people get that way.
They are intense.
Very. And I have to point out the structural brilliance of what Bayan does here. He provides fill-in-the-blank templates. For example, only blank gives you, or blank your way to wealth. It is quite literally like a game of Mad Libs for making money. You just plug your specific product into the formula.
It's very formulaic.
But I have to ask, doesn't this feel a bit cynical, like just plugging words into a formula to exploit people's desire for money?
I mean, it can certainly be used cynically, but the formula works because it is structurally sound. Think of it like structural engineering. If you are building a bridge, you use certain load-bearing pillars in specific configurations because the laws of physics demand it.
Okay, sure.
In copywriting, these formulas work because the laws of human nature demand it. They target the most fundamental desires, the craving for financial security, the desperate wish to escape the daily grind, and the universal dream of effortless wealth.
Yeah.
A phrase like, turn your free time into profits, is particularly insidious and effective because it reframes idle time. It makes relaxing feel like you are actively losing money,
Oh, wow. That's true.
which creates an immediate artificial sense of urgency to buy whatever system or product is being offered.
So we have grabbed their attention with a question. We have described the incredible, luxurious, elegantly simple money-making benefits of our offering. The reader is very interested, but interest doesn't pay the bills. We have to close the deal.
Right.
This brings us to part 3 of the toolkit, clinchers. This is all about pushing the reader over the final threshold of hesitation.
And this is exactly where a staggering number of amateur writers and communicators just completely fail.
Really? At the very end?
Yes. They spend all their energy making a brilliant case, they build all this desire, and then they awkwardly stumble at the finish line because they don't know how to explicitly ask for the sale, or they fail to neutralize the anxiety of the transaction.
The text focuses heavily in this section on removing friction and mitigating fear. Bayan groups these under minimizing risk. Examples include phrases like, you can't lose, send no money now, no risk later. And of course, the foundational bedrock of direct response.
The guarantee.
Yes, the guarantee. Unconditional money-back guarantee. We're not satisfied until you are. Let's analyze the psychology of risk aversion here. Why are these specific phrases so critical right at the moment of decision?
Because whenever a human being is asked to part with their resources, whether that is handing over their credit card, signing a contract, or even just committing their time to a project, they experience a physiological reaction. They experience a spike in cortisol, which is the primary stress hormone.
Why do we get stressed out by buying something we actually want?
Because of a concept in behavioral economics known as loss aversion. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky demonstrated that the psychological pain of losing something, like money, is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something of equal value.
Twice as powerful.
Yes. So when the reader hovers their finger over the Buy Now button, their brain is literally screaming at them, what if this is a scam? What if it breaks? What if I look foolish to my spouse for wasting this money? The clinchers provided in the text are designed to chemically lower that cortisol spike.
But how do words lower cortisol?
By entirely transferring the risk from the buyer's shoulders to the seller's shoulders. When the reader encounters the word free, or a phrase like no obligation or send no money now, the psychological stakes of saying yes instantly plummet to zero. The survival mechanisms in the brain relax. The brain says, well, if there is a 100% money-back guarantee, there is no threat to my resources, so it is safe to proceed. A strong, unconditional guarantee isn't just a customer service policy. It is the ultimate friction remover for the anxious reptilian brain.
That brings us to the final section of the toolkit, part 4, special strategies. This section includes phrases for enhancing a company's image like, we pioneered, or our total commitment to, which are excellent for establishing authority.
Right.
But the part of this section that I find most culturally relevant today is the appendix. Bayan includes a severe warning against what he terms puff speak.
Oh, puff speak. It is the absolute plague of modern corporate and business communication.
The book defines puff speak as inflated, pompous corporate jargon that is used either to disguise unpalatable negative concepts or simply out of a misguided attempt to sound more intelligent.
It's everywhere.
Bayan provides a translation guide that is simultaneously hilarious and just painfully accurate for anyone who has ever worked in an office.
Give us some of the translations.
Okay, the text mandates. Don't say at this point in time, just say now.
Because at this point in time, takes 5 clumsy words to do the exact same job as one precise word. It is pseudo-intellectual filler. It adds cognitive load without adding an ounce of meaning.
Don't say impact negatively, say worsen. Don't say effectuate, say bring about. And my absolute favorite example of corporate disguise, the text says don't say downsizing, say layoffs.
That last example is profound because it illustrates the dark side of copywriting. Downsizing or right-sizing are classic examples of using linguistic jargon to avoid emotional and moral responsibility.
It's cowardly, really.
It is. When a manager uses the word downsizing, it sounds mechanical, sterile, and inevitable, as if they were simply calibrating the dimensions of a machine. It shields the speaker from the reality of their actions. Layoffs, while still somewhat sterile, at least acknowledges the human reality that people are losing their livelihoods.
I think about the modern corporate environment, and we are practically bathed in puff speak from the moment we log on. We sit in meetings and hear executives talk about leveraging cross-functional synergies to maximize our income streams in this dynamic crisis situation.
And the immediate result of using that language is that you just sound like an algorithm. It completely strips you of your humanity and authenticity.
If someone listening to this takes away only one practical application from this deep dive, it should be this. Go through your resume, go through the pitch deck you are building or the important email you got sent to your team, and ruthlessly hunt down and strip out the puff speak.
Yes, do it today.
When you force yourself to use simple, direct words instead of inflated jargon, a remarkable thing happens. You instantly sound more confident, you sound authentic, and ironically, you sound significantly smarter.
Because true intellectual authority is demonstrated by the ability to explain complex, nuanced concepts simply. Hiding simple concepts behind needlessly complex words is the hallmark of an amateur trying to sound like an expert.
Let's pull all of these threads together and synthesize the core insight of this text. We have traversed the foundational rules of selling benefits over features. We have examined the locked-room mystery of direct mail and the jackrabbit environments of the digital arena.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We've looked at how grabbers exploit involuntary reflexes, how descriptions alter our psychological state, how clinchers reduce cortisol, and how puff speak destroys authenticity. When you look the true soul of words that sell, beneath all the lists and formulas, what is this book really teaching us?
If you connect all the dots, the profound realization is that effective persuasion is not about tricking people. Manipulation relies on deceit, obfuscation, and coercion. But as we saw, the text strictly demands accuracy, vivid truth, and the removal of jargon. The true soul of this book is about 2 things: clarity and empathy.
How does a book filled with Mad Lib's formulas for making money relate to empathy?
Well, empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. The entire architecture of persuasion Bayan lays out requires you to step outside of your own ego. You have to stop talking about your company, your aerospace aluminum, and your achievements.
Right.
You have to deeply understand the reader's desires, their anxieties, their fears of incompetence, and their hopes for security. It is the art of removing the friction between your solution and the person who desperately needs it. You aren't forcing a product down their throat. You're using language that aligns so perfectly with their internal state, but you clear the path. You allow them to see that your offering is the answer they have already been searching for.
Think about the next time you sit down to write a presentation, pitch a client, or even persuade a friend. Remember the architecture of this toolkit. Do not start with a feature list of how great you or your ideas are. Start with the benefit to the person sitting across from you.
Always.
What is in it for them? Use specific, vivid language that lights up their sensory switchboard. Give them the raspberry ice, not the frozen dessert. Use a provocative question to grab that first second of attention. Deploy a Johnson box summary so they know why they should listen. And close with a clincher that removes their fear of saying yes.
And do it all without a single drop of puff speak.
But I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over. Something that isn't explicitly addressed in Bayon's original index cards but feels incredibly pressing in our current landscape.
What's that?
As more and more people gain access to these exact frameworks, and as artificial intelligence learns to perfectly and instantly optimize these precise words that sell at a massive scale, does the general public eventually build up a total, impenetrable immunity to them?
Oh, that is the eternal arms race of advertising. Every time a new psychological lock is picked, the consumer eventually learns to change the locks.
If every email subject line is a perfectly calibrated provocative question, and every single checkout page screams free E with an unconditional guarantee, do we just become blind to the architecture?
It's very possible.
Will the ultimate persuasive language of the future actually abandon all these formulas? Will the most effective pitch simply be pure, unvarnished, radically transparent honesty, like the digital equivalent of a completely blank white envelope?
It is a fascinating paradox to consider. The more perfectly engineered the pitch becomes, the more suspicious our brains are trained to be.
Let that question change the way you interact with the world tomorrow. Try to spot the grabbers in the news headlines, find the benefits in the commercials, and look for the clinchers on your favorite websites. Once you see the invisible architecture of persuasion, you will never read a simple sentence the same way again. So, back in the late 1970s, there was this Harvard psychologist named Ellen Langer, and she ran this experiment that is just, well, it's pretty legendary now.
Oh, right, the copy machine study.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So she had these researchers walk up to people who were, waiting in line to use a library copy machine, and they would just try to cut in front of them.
Which, I mean, it's already a pretty bold move. People hate that.
Right. It's universally annoying. So when the researcher just asked, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine?" About 60% of people let them cut.
Which honestly is higher than I would have guessed.
Yeah, surprisingly generous. But here is where it gets crazy. When the researcher changed the request just slightly and said, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I have to make some copies?" the compliance rate shot up to 93%.
Wow, just from adding one phrase.
Right, and let that sink in for you listening. The reason they gave was completely meaningless. Literally everyone in that line had to make copies.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they're standing at a copy machine.
Exactly. But just the mere presence of the word "because" acted as this psychological skeleton key. It completely bypassed the rational brain and triggered this automatic habit of compliance.
It's just a phenomenal mechanism to study, really. Because, we invest vast amounts of capital and time and stress into developing the broad strokes of our ideas, right?
Oh, absolutely. The product features, the market analysis.
Yeah, the overarching brand philosophy, all of that.
Mm.
But we routinely neglect the actual vehicle that delivers those ideas into another human being's mind. Language isn't just a passive carrier information. It's an active instrument of influence.
And that instrument is exactly what we are dissecting today. We are taking a deep dive into this incredible source text called Words That Sell by Richard Bayon.
And this is such a crucial text.
It really is. Now, for you listening, I want to set the table properly here. This is not a dictionary. It's not some generic thesaurus you use to, avoid repeating yourself in a college essay.
No, definitely not.
The author describes it as a bottomless tackle box of psychological lures, which I love.
It's a great metaphor.
Right. If we look at persuasion as a form of cognitive lockpicking, this text is essentially the master kit showing you exactly which pins to hit to drop someone's defensive walls.
Which is a kit every single one of us needs, honestly. Because the term copywriting often makes people think of, advertising executives in glass boardrooms.
Yeah, the whole Mad Men vibe.
Exactly. But persuasion is the core currency of human interaction. Whether you're a founder trying to get venture capital, or a middle manager trying to rally a demoralized team,
or just someone trying to write a cover letter that doesn't put the hiring manager into a coma.
Right. In all those cases, you are in the business of persuasion. So this deep dive is about equipping you with the specific surgical linguistic tools to shape messages that bypass natural resistance and generate, enthusiastic action.
The thing that really struck me immediately while going through Bayon's work is the absolute permanence of human nature.
Oh, it's undeniable.
Because, the mediums have evolved so drastically over the last few decades. We've moved from direct mail catalogs and classic television jingles to algorithmic social media feeds and programmatic banner ads.
Ephemeral video content.
Yeah, TikTok, all of it. You would think the language of persuasion would have to be completely reinvented for that generation.
You'd think so, but no. The hardware receiving the message, which is the human brain, hasn't received a software update in millennia.
Right.
Not a single update. And that's the foundational premise of this entire approach. The delivery system is novel, but the psychological triggers are ancient.
So we're still running on the same basic programming.
Completely. The words that motivate the human spirit are anchored in our evolutionary biology. We are, and always will be, fundamentally obsessed with our social status, our physical and financial security.
The terror of missing out on crucial resources.
Exactly. FOMO is just ancient survival instinct. And, of course, the conservation of our own energy, which we now conveniently call convenience.
So the exact phrase that successfully sold a set of encyclopedias out of the back of a print magazine in 1985 is tapping into the exact same neural pathway as a microcopy headline designed to get you to click subscribe on a SaaS platform today.
The underlying emotion is identical. You're still selling relief or power or belonging. But before we open this tackle box and start throwing shiny, high-impact words around, we have to establish the rules of engagement.
Right, because you can't just sprinkle these words in and hope for the best.
Exactly. A powerful word used in the wrong context doesn't just fail. It actively damages your credibility. Bayan makes it abundantly clear that you cannot treat these words like magic spells. You need a rigorous preparatory strategy before you even touch a keyboard.
The prep work. The phase literally everyone wants to skip.
Because staring at a blank document is terrifying.
It really is. It feels way more productive to just start typing buzzwords and hope it works out. But Bayan breaks this pre-writing phase into a few non-negotiable steps. And the first one sounds almost insultingly simple, but I know for a fact people skip it.
Oh, they skip it constantly.
He says you have to gain first-hand knowledge of whatever it is you are writing about.
It sounds so simple until you realize how rarely it actually happens in modern corporate environments. Writers and marketers are frequently just, handed a spec sheet or a slide deck and told to make it sound exciting.
Yeah, jazz this up by tomorrow, thanks.
Right. But Bayan argues that you cannot write persuasively from a clinical distance. You have to get your facts straight using current sources, absolutely. But more importantly, if it is a physical product, you need to hold it. You need to use it.
You have to experience the sensory reality of the thing as the end consumer would.
Precisely.
It's almost like method acting for business. You have to inhabit the mindset of the buyer. Like if I'm writing about a new ergonomic office chair, I shouldn't just read the dimensions off a PDF.
No, you need to sit in the chair.
Right. I need to sit in it for 6 hours until my back either aches or feels supported. I need to feel the texture of the fabric. I need to find out if the armrests are annoying when I type.
Because those microscopic lived details are where the actual persuasive language lives. The lived details create authenticity. And, well, authenticity is impossible to fake.
It really is. People can smell it when you haven't actually used the thing you're selling.
Exactly. And when you live with the product, you automatically start asking the right internal questions. You stop asking, what does the engineering team want me to say? And you start asking, what specific friction in my day did this product just eliminate?
Which is such a powerful shift in perspective. Okay, so once you have that firsthand visceral understanding, you move to the second step of preparation, which Bayan calls positioning.
Positioning.
Now, I want to provide some friction here because positioning is a word that gets tossed around in literally every marketing meeting I've ever been in.
Usually right next to synergy.
Yes. Synergy and paradigm shift. It often just feels like abstract corporate word salad. So in the context of actual ground-level persuasive writing, what does positioning tangibly mean?
It is a deeply misunderstood term, I think. Let's strip away all that corporate gloss. In this context, positioning is about cognitive mapping.
Cognitive mapping, okay.
The human brain is bombarded with thousands of commercial messages every single day. To survive this cognitive overload, our brains aggressively categorize information into neat little mental boxes.
Otherwise, we just short circuit.
Exactly. So positioning is simply you deciding which specific mental box you want your product or idea to occupy in the audience's mind.
You have to choose the box for them.
Right. Beyond states, you need to know exactly how your offering is different from or superior to the surrounding competition. And crucially, you must be able to define that difference in a single, unadorned phrase.
So it's about finding your absolute exact lane. Like if I am pitching a new coffee shop in a really crowded neighborhood, I can't just say, well, we have great coffee and pastries and fast Wi-Fi, and it's very luxurious, but also highly affordable.
No, that breaks the brain's categorization process. It's too muddy.
Right, I have to choose the box. Am I the fastest espresso for impatient commuters? Or am I the luxury slow roast sanctuary for remote workers?
Because if you attempt to claim both of those boxes, your language will become contradictory, and the audience will simply ignore you to conserve their own energy.
A confused mind defaults to inaction.
Always. If you cannot articulate what you are selling in one surgically precise phrase, your audience has zero chance of figuring it out on their own. Positioning is the anchor for literally every adjective and verb you will subsequently choose.
Which flows so seamlessly into the third pre-writing requirement, knowing your audience.
This is huge.
Yeah, because if I've positioned my coffee shop as the fast commuter option, the language I use to talk to an impatient, caffeine-deprived commuter at 6:30 a.m. has to be radically different from the language I'd use to talk to someone looking for a leisurely Sunday brunch spot.
You're matching the frequency of the receiver, and the failure to do this is what we call context collapse.
Context collapse. Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Imagine you're writing a pitch for a highly complex, multi-million-dollar supply chain software.
Okay.
And you're presenting to a hard-boiled chief financial officer who is currently stressed about quarterly margins.
Okay. High stakes, high stress.
Right. If you use flowery, emotional language like talking about how your software will unleash the magical potential of their logistics ecosystem, you have instantly lost them.
You sound incredibly naive.
You do. You must speak their language, which is the language of cost efficiency, risk mitigation, and systemic stability.
But then, conversely, if you are selling a luxury vacation package to a consumer who's just desperately looking for an escape,
And you use dry, statistical language about the exact square footage of the resort and the temperature variances of the pool.
you completely kill the dream.
You bore them to tears. You have to know the emotional state the person is in when they encounter your words.
Okay, so we've lived with the idea, we've nailed our one-sentence position, and we know exactly whose brain we are trying to enter. We're finally ready to execute. We are at the keyboard. Ban introduces a primary directive here that I think is constantly violated, especially in the tech sector, he says.
Yeah.
Right to sell, not just to present facts.
Yes, but he also warns against runaway creativity.
What do you mean by that?
The goal of persuasive writing is not to win a Pulitzer Prize for literature. The goal is to motivate a specific human action. And many writers fall in love with their own cleverness.
I've always seen that.
They craft these poetic, structurally brilliant paragraphs, but they completely bury the actual value proposition. If the audience finishes reading your pitch and thinks, wow, that was beautifully written, but they have no idea what you were actually asking them to do or buy.
You have failed completely.
Entirely.
I see this constantly on startup landing pages. The design is gorgeous, the copy is incredibly slick, and I will read the entire homepage and think, I genuinely have no idea what this company actually does.
Just abstract chest thumping.
Exactly. It's sentence after sentence of, we are the pioneers of innovative, scalable synergy in the digital frontier. It's entirely company-centered copy.
And that chest thumping is driven by institutional ego. Companies want to talk about themselves. But the harsh psychological truth is that the consumer does not care about your company.
Not even a little bit.
They only care about themselves. This is why Bayon's golden rule for execution is, stress the benefits. Every single feature you present must be immediately translated into a direct benefit for the reader's life.
It's the classic distinction, right? The feature is the fact. The benefit is the emotion.
Precisely.
Like the feature is, this car has reinforced steel side impact airbags. That's a fact. But the benefit is your children will survive a collision.
And you have to bridge that gap for the reader because they won't do the mental heavy lifting themselves. You move from, look how innovative our engineering is, to look how much safer your family is.
But here's the critical nuance, right?
Yeah.
While we are aggressively stressing the benefits, Bayon draws a very hard line regarding the danger of overstatement.
Yes, the temptation, once you decide to sell the benefit, is to reach for the most explosive adjectives possible.
The trap of empty hype?
Exactly. If you pack your email or your pitch with words like fabulous, fantastic, revolutionary, and mind-blowing in every other sentence, you trigger the reader's evolutionary deception radar.
Because human beings are highly attuned to being scammed.
We are. When you rely on hyperbolic adjectives, you stop sounding like an authoritative, helpful guide, and you morph into a desperate propagandist. You destroy your own credibility.
It's the difference between telling someone what to feel and actually making them feel it.
Yes.
I always think of it like a comedian. If a comedian walks on stage and says, "I am hilarious, you are going to laugh so hard at my fantastic jokes," the audience immediately crosses their arms.
They're like, prove it.
Right. You don't tell me you're funny, you tell a joke and make me laugh.
That is a perfect parallel. The objective of your copy is not for you to call the product fabulous. The objective is to describe the product with such vivid, undeniable accuracy that the reader spontaneously thinks to themselves, wow, that sounds fabulous.
The conclusion must be theirs, not yours. And how do we force them to reach that conclusion? This brings us to what might be my favorite specific tactical rule from the entire source material. I'm going to call it the raspberry ice rule.
Ah, yes. The ultimate cure for the chest-thumping abstract buzzwords we were just talking about.
The battle between hazy abstractions and concrete details.
Exactly. Bayan asks this incredibly clarifying question. If you were at a restaurant, would you rather order a frozen dessert or a raspberry ice?
It immediately exposes the flaw in how most businesses communicate. Because frozen dessert is factually accurate, right? It is a category.
But it is entirely abstract.
It contains zero sensory data. The brain reads it and feels absolutely nothing.
But raspberry ice, on the other hand, instantly conjures a vivid sensory experience. The olfactory bulb in the brain practically activates. You can see the deep red color, you can feel the crystalline temperature on your tongue, you can almost taste that specific balance of tart and sweet.
It bypasses the analytical brain and goes straight to the sensory memory. And this principle translates to literally every form of communication.
Hazy abstractions kill momentum.
They really do. If I am pitching my consulting services and I say, "We offer optimized customer service," that is a frozen dessert.
It means nothing.
It's invisible. But if I say, "We answer every client phone call by the second ring," that is raspberry ice. It is observable, concrete, and it sparks a mental movie in the prospect's head of a phone ringing exactly twice and then being picked up.
And beyond just sparking the imagination, concrete detail builds structural trust.
How so?
Well, when a speaker or a writer relies on broad approximations in hazy language, the audience subconsciously senses evasion. They feel like you are hiding a flaw behind the fog.
Oh, like you're being intentionally vague to cover something up.
Right. Specificity signals transparency. Bayan also extends this rule to the notorious then what? Comparisons that plague advertising.
Oh, the orphaned comparatives, like a battery commercial saying it lasts longer.
Lasts longer than what? A fruit fly?
Exactly. Or a detergent that gets clothes cleaner,
Yeah.
cleaner than washing them in a puddle of mud.
Right. When you leave these hazy, undefined gaps in your language, you might think you're letting the consumer fill in the blank with their own ideal scenario.
But they don't do that.
No. The reality of cognitive load means the audience will not do the work to complete your sentence. They will simply discard the claim as meaningless noise and move on. You must sharpen the edges of your picture.
Okay, so to synthesize this foundational philosophy before we move forward for you listening, you must physically or mentally live with the idea until you know its sensory details. You must map its exact position in the marketplace in a single phrase.
You must calibrate your tone to the emotional state of your specific audience.
You must ruthlessly translate features into emotional benefits without relying on hype, and you must always, always serve them raspberry ice instead of a frozen dessert.
It's a formidable foundation, but having the psychological ammunition is only half the battle. If you fire a cannon in a small library, you don't persuade anyone, you just create panic and make a lot of enemies.
Right. The environment where these words live entirely dictates the weapon of choice.
Exactly. A pitch that is mathematically perfect for a billboard will fail catastrophically in an email.
The environment changes the physics of the interaction. Let's explore how these rules bend to fit the medium. Bayan starts with the print arsenal.
Now, I know we live in a digital-first world, but the psychology of these print mediums maps perfectly onto how we consume different types of digital content today.
Totally. Let's look at what he calls magalogs. What is the psychological function of a magalog? Because I hadn't even heard that term before.
A magalog is a fascinating hybrid. It's a miniature magazine created, funded, and mailed entirely by a single organization. It is the ultimate Trojan horse of advertising.
Okay, why is it a Trojan horse?
The genius of the magalog is environmental control. Because the brand controls both the subtle advertising and the heavy editorial content, The reader enters a state of leisurely consumption.
They're just flipping through it.
Right. They're reading long-form, informative articles, looking at high-quality photography, absorbing tips. Their psychological guard, which is normally raised super high against direct mail, is lowered.
They become deeply involved in the narrative without feeling the aggressive pressure of a hard sell.
Exactly. It's the print equivalent of a highly produced hour-long documentary on YouTube that just happens to be sponsored by a brand. You are giving them so much genuine value and entertainment that they don't mind the underlying commercial motive.
But Bayan notes there is a significant strategic downside to this approach, right?
Oh, yeah. The downside is resource intensity. They are phenomenally expensive to produce, write, and mail. Furthermore, because you are dedicating 80% of your real estate to editorial content to maintain the illusion of a magazine, you actually have drastically less active selling space than you would in a standard product catalog.
So you really have to pick your battles with it.
Exactly. The strategy dictates that you only deploy Megalog for a complex, high-ticket product or service, something with an abundance of nuanced features that requires a slow, methodical, educational approach to justify the cost.
Okay, contrast that leisurely stroll with what he calls space ads. These are the printed ads you see occupying a quarter page or a full page in traditional magazines and newspapers.
Right, and I appreciate his analogy here. He notes they range from the sleek, high-budget wolfhounds of Madison Avenue to the plucky, chaotic mutts that yelp for attention in the classified back pages.
It perfectly captures the visual hierarchy and the governing rule for space ads, particularly those smaller, plucky mutt ads with limited visual real estate, is that your copywriting must do the heavy lifting instantly.
You do not have the luxury of a leisurely editorial preamble.
Not at all. You are an uninvited guest in the middle of an article the person actually wants to read. Your headline must reach out, grab them by the collar, and justify the interruption in 3 seconds or less.
It's a very aggressive environment. And speaking of brutal environments, he discusses card decks.
Oh man, for our listeners who might not remember these, they were literal shrink-wrapped packets filled with dozens of loose postcard-sized ads from different companies, all mailed together.
Just a stack of chaos.
Pure chaos. The psychology here is fascinating because it's pure, unfiltered competition.
The card deck is the print equivalent of a shouting match in a trading pit. You are forcing the reader to sift through 50 other desperate voices, all competing for the exact same split second of attention.
So subtlety goes out the window.
Oh, completely. Subtlety is a liability here. Bayan advises that your copy must practically knock the reader over the head to register.
You deploy the boldest, shortest, punchiest headlines possible.
You strip away all nuance, offer instant, undeniable benefits, and demand a massive, clear call to action. You can't whisper a complex philosophy at a rock concert. You just scream the name of the band.
I love that analogy. But Bayan draws a sharp distinction between the card deck and the standalone postcard, even though they look physically similar.
The physical form is similar, but the environmental context is night and day. The postcard is a miniature self-mailer. When a person pulls a postcard out of their mailbox, you are not competing with 50 other cards in a stack.
It's just you and them.
Right. For the brief, 2-second window it takes them to look at the card, while standing over their recycling bin, you possess their exclusive, undivided attention.
So your language still needs to be highly assertive and instantly readable.
But you aren't forced to scream over a crowd. It is the perfect medium for a single, easy-to-explain concept or a highly localized offer.
Okay, that gives us the architectural blueprints of print. But let's take these psychological blueprints and apply them to the digital battlefield, because this is where our audience lives, breathes, and tries to survive the noise every single day. Let's start with websites.
Okay, websites.
The fatal flaw most companies make is treating their website like a digital filing cabinet or just a static brochure. Bayan says a website is an extended, immersive ad and a massive brand statement.
And the psychology of a web user is radically different from someone sitting in a comfortable armchair flipping through a Megalog.
So different.
Bayan uses a very apt metaphor here. He compares web surfers to jackrabbits. They are jittery, impatient, and constantly hopping around as their immediate impulses dictate. Their fingers are always hovering over the back button or a new tab.
I feel that in my bones. The anxiety of a cluttered website is a real, physiological response.
It is.
If I click a link and the page loads and I am hit with a wall of dense text and I can't instantly figure out where the pricing is or what the product actually does within 3 seconds, I am gone. The cognitive fatigue is just too high.
Because of that jackrabbit behavior and the constant threat of cognitive fatigue, web copy must be aggressively brisk and highly scannable. On a landing page, you cannot present long, winding narratives.
No one will read them.
You must deploy pithy, punchy teaser statements. You have to break the visual monotony with bold subheads, bulleted lists, ample white space. You're essentially creating a visual slide for the eye to easily travel down.
It makes me think of retail architecture, like a website is a physical store layout. The homepage is your front window display.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. You do not tape the densely written instruction manuals to the glass of the window. You put the brightest, most arresting, most desirable objects in the window solely to get them to walk through the front door.
Which in the digital world means clicking a deeper link.
Exactly. You save the dense manuals for the back of the store, for the people who are already invested in looking for the details.
That is precisely the architectural logic. Now, assuming they have entered the store and shown interest, how do you manage the ongoing communication?
This is where Bayon offers a crucial contrast between standard email sales letters and e-zines, which we now commonly call newsletters.
Right.
Now, I want to push back on this area a little because the digital landscape has shifted so violently since Bayon was writing. We are living in an era of unprecedented newsletter fatigue.
Oh, absolutely.
I currently have thousands of unread emails. I guard my inbox like it's a heavily fortified bunker. When an uninvited sales email breaches the wall, I don't just ignore it. I feel active resentment towards the sender. How does Bayon's advice survive in this hostile environment?
Well, your reaction actually perfectly illustrates his point about the standard email sales letter. The unsolicited sales email is the digital equivalent of a cold-calling telemarketer interrupting your dinner.
It's the worst.
You are fighting massive, ingrained public resistance to spam. If you must use this approach, Bannon notes it has to mirror the absolute best of traditional direct mail. An undeniably compelling hook, a fast, engaging story, tangible and immediate benefits, and a low-risk invitation to respond. But it is an uphill battle against hostility.
So if the cold email is the telemarketer, how does the newsletter survive the purge?
Because the newsletter, when executed correctly, shifts the dynamic from a transaction to a relationship. This is the parasocial economy. The audience actually opted in.
They gave you the keys to the bunker.
Exactly. They actively invited you into their inbox because you promised them informative, valuable, or entertaining content, not just a pitch. Because you are providing this value consistently, their psychological guard is lowered, much like it was with the print Mugalog.
So you have to change your tone.
You must drop the aggressive, hard sell tone. You adopt a conversational, authoritative, and helpful voice. You aren't hunting for a quick sale. You are a farmer cultivating trust over months or years.
The hunter versus the farmer. I love that.
And when they finally do need your product, they won't even look at the competition because you are the only one who has earned their trust.
Okay, now let's look at the digital formats that no one invites into their lives. The digital billboards, banner ads, and pop-ups. I actually laughed out loud reading this section because Bayon doesn't mince words.
He really doesn't.
He describes pop-up ads as the scourge of the internet and pesky intruders. He basically begs the reader to avoid creating them because they just breed deep resentment.
And psychological studies completely back him up. Pop-ups violently interrupt the user's intended goal. It is an act of digital aggression, and the immediate emotional response is frustration, which is the exact opposite of the state you want a buyer in.
You don't buy things when you're angry.
No. Banner ads, conversely, are miniature, static billboards. They exist on their periphery. They must use striking visuals or motion to entice a click away from the main content. But Bayon points out a fascinating quirk of human psychology regarding banner ads.
What's that?
They must always include an explicit, literal command, such as the words, "click here."
See, this always seems so redundant to me. It's a button on a screen. Obviously, I know I'm supposed to click it. Why do I need to be treated like a toddler and told to click here?
It isn't about intelligence. It is about reducing cognitive friction to absolute zero. When a user is reading an article, their brain is engaged in comprehension. If they glance at a banner ad, they have to momentarily switch contexts.
Okay.
If you just show a picture of a shoe and a price, the brain has to process. That is a shoe, it costs money. Is this just an image? Is it a link? What happens if I touch it?
That's a lot of micro questions.
And that microsecond of processing is enough friction to stop the action entirely. When you explicitly write, "click here to buy," you remove the processing requirement. You give the brain a direct, undeniable instruction. It turns out, When people are distracted, they actually prefer to be told exactly what to do.
Wow, you are just removing the mental speed bumps. Which brings us to the actual physical real world, billboards on the side of a highway.
Right.
The rule here is survival of the fastest. Beyond says visuals must absolutely dominate and verbiage must be kept to the barest minimum for a very practical reason. You do not want to cause traffic accidents.
It is the ultimate test of brevity.
Yeah.
You have an audience traveling at 70 miles an hour. You have a window of 1 to 3 seconds of visual contact.
So fast.
The image has to convey the entire emotion of the pitch, and the words simply anchor the image with a brand name or a 5-word concept. If you put a paragraph on a billboard, you are wasting your money and endangering lives.
And finally, in terms of environments, he covers the press release, which is a vital tool for founders or PR professionals trying to secure media coverage. And the trap here is failing to understand who you are actually writing for.
Right, you are not writing for the public, you are writing for a cynical journalist.
Exactly. Which means the tone must undergo a complete metamorphosis. A press release cannot sound like an advertisement. It must utilize journalistic camouflage.
I like that phrase, journalistic camouflage.
It has to be objective, factual, and newsy. If you send an editor a press release packed with all the aggressive grabbers and fabulous adjectives we use in sales copy, their internal alarm bells ring immediately.
They label it as corporate puffery and hit delete.
It's instantly discarded. You have to write it as if a detached, sober reporter observed your company and wrote an article about it. You serve them the facts on a silver platter so they can just copy and paste it into their publication.
Precisely. You are removing their friction by adopting their native language.
All right, this brings us to the core of the source material. We have laid the foundation. We understand the unique physics of our environments, from the leisurely newsletter to the screaming card deck. Now, we finally open the tackle box itself and examine the anatomical structure of a persuasive pitch.
This is where it gets really practical.
Yeah. Bion divides this structure into 4 distinct phases, and the very first phase is all about the initiation. He calls them grabbers.
Grabbers encompass the headlines, the email subject lines, the bold teaser text. Their sole dedicated function is to arrest the reader's momentum and pull them into the body of the message. If the grabber fails, the rest of your brilliantly crafted copy is effectively invisible.
It doesn't matter how good the rest of it is.
Nope.
I conceptualize a grabber like a handshake or maybe a tap on the shoulder in a crowded, noisy room. If the tap is too weak, I don't notice it. If the tap is too aggressive or weird, my defenses go up and the interaction is ruined before I even turn around.
That's a great way to think about it.
The source material provides these massive, categorized lists of specific grabber phrases. I want to pull a few of these specific examples out and really dissect the neurochemistry of why they work.
Let's analyze the mechanics.
Let's start with a classic head and slogan category. The phrase, "We don't cut corners."
Okay, that phrase is highly effective because it directly addresses one of the most primal consumer anxieties: loss aversion and the fear of being exploited.
Which is everywhere now.
Oh, in a modern economy flooded with cheap disposable goods, the consumer's default assumption is that a company will sacrifice quality to increase their own margins.
See, they usually do.
Right. So by leading with, "We don't cut corners," you aren't just selling a product, you are selling integrity. You immediately lower their defensive shield by acknowledging their hidden fear and promising you won't trigger it.
You are disarming the bomb before it goes off. Okay, how about this one, which leans in the opposite direction? Genius at work.
That is a pure, unadulterated appeal to ego and status. It promises that the product was crafted by exceptional minds, and by association, the consumer is exceptional for recognizing and purchasing it.
It makes them feel smart.
Yes. It elevates a simple transaction into an alignment with elite intelligence.
Okay, here is a structural grabber I see utilized constantly across social media and digital marketing. Fiction blank fact blank.
That structure leverages a psychological phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance, combined with a pattern interrupt.
Break that down for you.
Well, we walk through life with a set of established beliefs. When a headline boldly labels a common belief as fiction, it creates instant intellectual tension. It tells the reader, "You have been operating on false data, you have been lied to, and I possess the hidden truth."
And we can't resist that.
We really can't. Because the human brain craves closure and resolution, a concept known as the Zeigarnik effect. It becomes almost physically uncomfortable to read the fiction statement and not read the fact statement to resolve the tension.
It's like a micro-mystery novel. The brain demands the answer to the puzzle. Okay. Bion also details a category he calls opening with a statement, which are designed for the first line of the actual copy.
Phrases like, "It's no secret that," or "Forget everything you've heard about."
Or let me ask you a simple question.
Look at the common thread running through those openings. "Forget everything you've heard about" implies a massive paradigm shift. It promises that you are about to be granted access to a new, superior reality, making you an insider.
But what about, let me ask you this simple question. That one feels different.
It is. It's perhaps the most mechanically powerful. When you are asked a direct question, even rhetorically in text, your brain's processing center involuntarily boots up to formulate an answer.
You can't help it.
You really can't. You cannot passively read a question. You have effectively trapped the reader's brain in an active dialogue.
It's conversational judo. You use the brain's own automatic reflexes against it to force engagement. Okay, so the grabber has successfully stopped them from scrolling. They have turned around. Now we enter part 2 of Band's anatomy, which he calls descriptions and benefits.
This is the meat of the pitch.
This is where you have to deliver the raspberry ice. How do you select words that make the buyer actually feel the benefit in their body?
You must map your vocabulary to the specific emotional state you're trying to induce. Band categorizes these descriptive words based on the desired emotional outcome. Let's examine the category he labels for complete or thorough products.
Okay, these are phrases like everything from A to Z, or the comprehensive guide to, or the only blank you'll ever need.
If we step back and look at the modern consumer landscape, what is the dominant psychological condition? It is decision fatigue.
Oh, 100%. People are exhausted.
They're exhausted by infinite choices. They don't want to evaluate 12 different software platforms to run their business. They want one that does it all.
So when you say the only one you'll ever need,
You are not just selling features. You are selling the profound emotional relief of a finished search. You are telling their exhausted brain, you can stop evaluating now. You can rest. We have taken care of everything.
the luxury of not having to think anymore, that is incredibly potent. Now let's pivot to a category that requires high energy. The fabulous category.
Okay.
This is when you do want to inject pure adrenaline, assuming you have earned the right to do so without sounding like a huckster. Words like dazzling, sublime, earth-shaking, breathtaking.
These are deeply visceral words.
Right.
They are designed to trigger physical arousal and a spike in dopamine. Consider the difference between describing a new sports car's acceleration as very good versus describing it as breathtaking.
Right. Good is just a rating.
Exactly. Good is an intellectual evaluation. Breathtaking literally describes a physiological reaction, the sudden, violent pulling of oxygen from your lungs due to extreme G-force. It forces the reader's brain to simulate the physical experience of driving the car.
It bridges the gap between text on a screen and a physical sensation in the body.
It does.
What about the category he calls indispensable? This is framing a product not as a luxury, but as an absolute necessity for survival. The phrases here are intense, a vital link, the nerve center of, you'll wonder how you ever got along without it.
Those words act directly on the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. They trigger the emotion of security, and by inversion, the terror of loss or failure.
The nerve center.
Right. If you call a piece of software the nerve center of your operations, you are implying a biological metaphor. If the nerve center is severed, the organism is paralyzed and dies.
It elevates the product from a nice-to-have tool to a fundamental pillar of existence.
Exactly. And the phrase, "you wonder how you ever got along without it," is a brilliant psychological trick.
How so?
It forcefully projects the reader's mind into the future, making them imagine a reality where your product has already solved all their problems and they're looking back with gratitude. It assumes the sale has already happened in their imagination.
You are hacking their timeline. You place them in a future where they are already relying on you. That is profound.
It's very effective.
Let's unpack one more category from the meat of the pitch. The informative category. Phrases like eye-opening, takes the guesswork out of, takes you behind closed doors.
What is occurring beneath the surface here is an appeal to power dynamics. In human society, information is leverage.
Okay.
Takes the guesswork out of, sells certainty in an inherently chaotic and unpredictable world. But takes you behind closed doors is a direct appeal to our primate desire to climb the social hierarchy.
It promises insider access.
It whispers that you are being allowed into the VIP room where the real decisions are made, while the rest of the public remains ignorant outside. It flatters the reader's ego and empowers them simultaneously.
Okay, let's trace the journey so far. We've grabbed them by challenging a core belief or asking an inescapable question.
Right.
We've fed them the meat of the pitch by offering the deep relief of a complete solution, the physical thrill of a dazzling experience, the absolute security of an indispensable tool, and the elite status of inside information. They are primed.
Very prime.
Which brings us to segment 4, special strategies and the art of the close.
Because the harsh reality of persuasion is that you can perfectly execute the hook and flawlessly articulate the benefits, but if you do not meticulously manage the final moments of the interaction,
The prospect will just walk away.
and all your effort evaporates.
You have to stick the landing. And part of sticking the landing, especially for larger transactions or B2B sales, involves selling abstract concepts like trust and prestige. Beyond details how to use language to enhance a company's overarching image.
This is critical for brand building.
Right. He highlights phrases like, our commitment to excellence, we pioneered our distinctive style of.
In high-stakes environments, trust is heavily reliant on the perception of history, stability, and industry leadership. Anyone can manufacture a product, but not everyone can create a legacy.
I see.
If you say, we make this software, you're stating a mundane fact. If you say, we pioneered this software architecture, you are telling a grand narrative of innovation. You position yourself as the origin point.
And our commitment to excellence.
A phrase like that moves the relationship away from a mere financial transaction and implies a shared moral and philosophical standard. You elevate the company into an institution.
It makes the buyer feel like they are investing in a movement, not just buying a widget.
Exactly.
Buy-in also highlights a strategy called using demographics to impress. And let's be honest, this is pure ego manipulation.
Absolutely.
It involves rhetorically asking, what kind of people use this? And answering with highly flattering adjectives like upwardly mobile, financially astute, savvy, or discriminating.
It works because humans are deeply tribal creatures, and we are fiercely protective of our self-image. We desperately want to belong to high-status tribes.
Of course.
When an advertisement asks, is this investment strategy for the financially astute? The reader's internal monologue immediately fires back, well, yes, I consider myself financially astute. I am not foolish.
By simply agreeing with the aspirational adjective you have provided, they have unconsciously aligned themselves with your product.
You flatter them into submission. It is a very elegant form of peer pressure.
It's the linguistic version of the velvet rope outside a club. Only smart, successful people come in here. You're smart and successful, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of mental energy to admit you aren't.
It really does.
Now, I want to pivot slightly here because Buy-On includes a section on selling your ideas. And for the listener who is not a full-time copywriter but is trying to navigate a corporate hierarchy, secure a promotion, or pitch an internal initiative.
This section is pure gold.
It really is. He provides a masterclass on power verbs.
The specific verbs you select to describe your own labor entirely dictate how your competence and leadership potential are perceived by upper management.
When most people update a resume or write a self-evaluation, they use passive, weak verbs. They say, I did this project, or I worked on this team, or I was responsible for this outcome.
And Buy-In argues you must replace those with kinetic power verbs.
Right. You didn't work on a project. You spearheaded, revitalized, streamlined, transformed, or maximized it.
Analyze the visual imagery and the kinetic energy embedded in those specific choices. I worked on the Q3 report. Paints a static, unimpressive mental picture of an employee sitting passively at a cubicle typing on a keyboard. It implies participation, but not impact.
What about spearheaded?
I spearheaded the Q3 initiative. Paints an ancient, visceral picture of a warrior standing at the very front of a phalanx, holding a weapon, aggressively leading a charge into hostile territory. It implies forward momentum, courage, and the ability to break through resistance.
It casts you as the protagonist of the corporate narrative. My favorite is revitalized. It literally implies bringing something back from the dead. It makes you sound like a corporate necromancer.
I love that. Corporate necromancer.
And streamlined paints a picture of you ruthlessly carving away organizational friction. Maximized implies you possess the alchemical ability to extract the absolute peak potential from limited resources. These verbs don't just describe what you did, they describe who you are.
They project executive presence. They are non-negotiable tools for performance reviews, cover letters, and any scenario where you must advocate for your own value.
So you've deployed the power verbs, you've built the institutional trust, you've flattered their ego. How do you finally cross the finish line? Bion labels the third part of his structural anatomy the clinchers. This is the immediate call to action and the critical follow-through.
The clincher is the crucible. It is the moment of decision. The call to action itself must be crystalline in its clarity, inject a sense of urgency, and minimize the perception of risk.
Yeah, but there's a phase that businesses chronically neglect, right?
Yes, the psychological management of the customer the moment after they say yes.
The post-purchase communication. Phrases like, welcome aboard. You've joined over 10,000 smart professionals who, quote, you couldn't have picked a better time to ask us about. I've always found this fascinating. The transaction is complete. The money has changed hands. Why is it so critical to deploy persuasive language after you've won?
Because of the psychological phenomenon of buyer's remorse, driven by cognitive dissonance.
Okay, walk me through that.
The exact moment a human being parts with their resources, whether it's thousands of dollars or just handing over their primary email address, they experience an immediate, sharp spike in anxiety.
Their brain panics.
Yes. Did I make a mistake? Was I manipulated? Is there a better option I missed? The follow-through phrases are engineered to instantly neutralize that anxiety and validate their decision.
It's psychological first aid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Welcome aboard instantly replaces the feeling of I just lost money with the feeling of I just gained entry into a community.
And the phrase, you've joined 10,000 smart professionals.
That deploys the immense power of social proof.
Yeah.
It tells our panicking brain, look, 10,000 other intelligent people evaluated this risk and took this exact action. You are not alone. You are not foolish. You are safe.
Wow.
It transforms a highly anxious, one-time buyer who might demand a refund into a relaxed, validated, and loyal advocate.
You are cementing the foundation of a long-term relationship in that crucial 5-minute window after the click.
Precisely.
Okay, we have exhaustively covered the tools required to construct an incredibly persuasive, ethically sound message. But Bayan argues that to truly attain mastery over this language, we must be intimately aware of the words that destroy persuasion.
The dark side of copywriting.
Which brings us to our final exploration, the trap of puff speak.
This appendix on puff speak might be the most vital sociological observation in the entire text.
How so?
Puff speak refers to the bloated, inflated, jargon-heavy words that have pummeled their way into our daily corporate lexicon. They're elaborate, pseudo-intellectual disguises used to mask mundane, uncomfortable, or highly unpopular realities.
It is the ultimate corporate camouflage.
It really is.
I want to play a game of translation here using Bayan's actual text, because hearing the translation exposes the absurdity of the language we use every day. I'm going to give you the corporate puff speak word, and I want you to give me Bayan's brutal, honest translation.
Oh, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's start with a boardroom classic. Bottom line.
Translation. What's in it for us?
It's so true. People say, let's look at the bottom line to sound objective and financially rigorous, but they are actually just saying, I only care about how this benefits me personally.
Completely self-serving.
Okay, next one. Downsizing.
Translation. Layoffs. Or, more accurately, firing human beings.
That one is genuinely dark. It takes the devastating human element of people losing their livelihoods and sanitizes it into a mathematical equation about sizing.
It's totally sterile.
How about a ubiquitous one? Leverage.
Translation. Take advantage of.
Right. You don't want to say, we are going to take advantage of our suppliers, so you say, we will leverage our supplier network. It sounds like physics instead of exploitation.
It sounds so much smarter.
What about counterproductive?
Translation. Futile. Or simply, it failed.
And my absolute favorite, the most pretentious of them all, Byzantine.
Translation. Scheming. Elaborately contrived or unnecessarily complicated.
When you lay these translations bare, you realize how much energy we waste engaging in this linguistic gymnastics. But we have to ask the deeper question. Why does this happen? Why do multi-billion-dollar corporations, staffed by highly educated people, communicate in this dense, hazy fog?
Because puff speak functions as an emotional and professional shield.
A shield.
Yes, it is driven by institutional anxiety and the desire for plausible deniability. Middle managers and executives use puff speak for two reasons. Either to artificially inflate their own intellectual status, or to soften the blow of catastrophic news.
Right, like the downsizing example.
Exactly. If a manager stands up and says, we are firing 100 people because our strategy was futile and failed, they are exposed. They will face anger and accountability.
That's career suicide.
But if they stand up and say, we are undergoing a strategic downsizing to optimize our leverage after a counterproductive quarter,
Wow, they sound like a sophisticated, detached tactician.
The words protect their ego and diffuse the anger in a cloud of confusion.
They're using words to build a wall, rather than using words to build a bridge to the audience.
Precisely. But here is the vital takeaway for our listeners who want to master persuasion. While puck speak might successfully protect your ego in a hostile boardroom, it is absolute poison for persuasive writing.
Because it's the exact opposite of the raspberry ice rule.
It is the antithesis of it. It is pure, unfiltered abstraction. When you are trying to convince someone to buy, to click, to believe, your language must be relentlessly clear and direct.
And puff speak just muddies the water.
It introduces massive cognitive load because it requires the reader to mentally translate your jargon back into normal human concepts.
And as we established earlier, the brain hates doing extra work. If I have to translate your pitch to understand it, I'm just going to close the tab.
Exactly. A confused mind always defaults to no. Clarity is the ultimate flex of a master persuader. If you truly understand your value, you don't need to hide behind synergy and leverage. You can just state the bold, unvarnished truth.
A confused mind always says no. That is the perfect distillation of everything we've discussed today. So what does this massive deep dive into the architecture of persuasion ultimately mean for you, the listener? Let's weave all these threads together.
Let's do it.
Persuasive writing. Whether you are crafting a high-stakes email, designing a startup landing page, or pitching a radical new idea to your team, is not about tricking people. It is not about deploying a sequence of manipulative words to con someone into acting against their own interests.
Not in the slightest.
Yeah.
Sustainable persuasion is built on a foundation of profound clarity and radical empathy. It requires you to step outside of your own ego to deeply understand the emotional reality of the person you are communicating with.
And then meticulously select the exact linguistic tool from Bain's tackle box that addresses their specific need.
Exactly. It is the discipline of knowing the difference between offering someone a hazy, frozen dessert and serving them a vivid, sensory raspberry ice.
It is understanding environmental physics, knowing that you do not scream at someone while they are reading a leisurely newsletter, and you do not whisper nuances at them when they are scrolling frantically through a crowded social feed. You match the frequency of the medium.
And above all else, it is the discipline of stressing the benefits. You must constantly ask yourself, how does this specific sentence improve the life, the security, or the status of the human being reading it?
Do you deploy verbs and adjectives that trigger the profound relief of a complete solution?
The physical excitement of a dazzling experience.
The biological security of an indispensable tool.
And the social power of inside information. And you do all of this while rigorously stripping away the cowardly, confusing fog of corporate puff speak.
It really is a master lock-picking kit. The words are just sitting there in the dictionary, dormant, waiting for you to assemble them into the correct sequence.
And when you internalize these frameworks, the terror of the blank page vanishes. You are no longer blindly groping for words, hoping to sound smart. Your cognitive energy is freed up to focus on the true objective, architecting a message that bypasses resistance and generates an enthusiastic, undeniable yes.
Which is the singular goal of every communication we send out into the world. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you transition back to your daily life.
A little homework.
Exactly. The next time you open your inbox, or you land on a highly engaging website, or you find yourself inexplicably drawn to a billboard on your commute, force yourself to stop for 3 seconds.
Break the spell.
Break the spell. Look critically at the specific power verbs and the aspirational adjectives they have chosen. Analyze the structure of their grabber. Identify exactly which primal emotion their benefits are targeting. Ask yourself, are you simply reading their words? Or have their words been perfectly engineered to read you?
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.